This guy wakes up in a totally weird place, just lying in the grass and looking around, wondering if he should even get up since he has zero clue how he ended up in the middle of this forest. He was surrounded by bizarre plants he'd never seen before, and as he stood up, he clutched his head to try and dull the throbbing pain. He stood up and realized he was in a totally different world, so he started looking around while trying to forget the absolute nightmare of how he actually died. He was totally lost and had no clue where to go, but while he was stuck in his head, a huge bear suddenly showed up right behind him. The beast started roaring to terrify him, and the guy was so freaked out that he just stood there shaking, having no clue what to do since he never expected things to get this crazy right after waking up. He started panicking to find a way out, thinking about playing dead, running for his life, or fighting back. But fighting was easily the most insane move he could make. The bear started closing in, making the guy freak out even harder. And since he had no better plan, he literally just said hi to the monster. Instead of backing off like he hoped, the beast just got way more aggressive, proving this guy totally picked the wrong way to fight back. Just as the bear was about to pounce, slime suddenly swarmed it and locked it in place, leaving the guy totally shocked by what just happened. The slime swallowed the beast like it was drowning deep underwater. The bear was totally trapped and started thrashing around, desperately trying to break free. Our guy just stood there confused because even though the bear was... Before long, the bear starts melting in the slime like it's straight up acid. The monster finally stops moving and goes totally still. Our guy realizes this is way too gross for him. The bear was finally out of the way, but he realized the slime was just as deadly and he could feel it gearing up to jump him. But then, out of nowhere, his hiding spot gets totally wrecked. And when he spins around to see what happened, he realizes the slime is already right in his face. But the weird goo didn't attack him. It just sat right where the bear used to be. He tried to stay calm so he could figure out what to do next. That slime just ate. Our guy finally stopped acting like a total idiot and started playing it safe. Seeing that massive bear pop up made him realize he seriously needed to learn how this crazy world works. But believe it or not, to stay safe, he grabbed a branch that looked just like a wooden sword, so he could smash through all those spider nests. As the guy wanders through the forest, he spots some people he thinks are just normal folks, but they're actually brutal savages carrying around human meat. He was totally spooked and crawled behind the bushes to hide before those robbers could jump him. After wandering for ages, he finally hits a real road and starts crying tears of joy, so he carves a message into a tree to mark the official start of his epic adventure. He was totally weirded out by how strange everything felt. But after hiking through the woods for a long time, he stumbled onto a castle that looked exactly like the ones from the fantasy stories he always read. He walked right up to the castle gates and shouted a friendly greeting, but the guards didn't understand a single word he said and immediately dragged him off to jail. He was in such a rush to meet people that he ended up behind bars because the guards had no clue who this random guy was. The guy totally panicked and yelled that he just wanted protection from the monsters, but when the guards finally spoke back, he couldn't understand a single word they were saying. Knowing there was nothing he could do, he flopped onto the hay and drifted off while replaying all the crazy stuff that had just happened. This dude was terrified of what would happen next, because in just a few hours he'd been jumped by a bear, watched a slug eat that bear, ran into bandits, and then got thrown. The guy gets smacked awake and sees a girl in armor standing right there, and after chatting with the guards, this blonde girl turns around and points her finger right at him. Since the girl in armor was smiling, the guy thought she was friendly and waved at her. But she totally hated that and decked him so hard he was stuck on the ground doubled over in pain. This girl is low-key super strong, so after the guy passes out again, she just stuffs him in a bag and drags him off. And when he finally wakes up, he realizes he's being hauled straight towards some random building. After a bit, he feels the bag getting untied and starts wiggling out, only to find two girls staring him down. And one of them is that same armored chick who dragged him too. The blonde girl shouts to Maya that the guy is awake, right as he bursts completely out of the bag. He was ready to roast the girl for being so rude, but he stopped dead in his tracks when he realized he could actually understand her foreign language. The short-haired girl tells him to chill since they're in a church, and the lady explains that a magic spell is the only reason he can understand and speak their language now. The guy realized the spell was basically a chewing gum translator, but when the girl in the dress asked what he was talking about, he quickly changed the subject. The guy stands up and whines that the night girl was way too rough, making the short-haired girl give her friend Ilias a total, "Seriously?" look. The guy was super confused about everything that happened, but he didn't think the girls would actually believe his wild story. The girl from the church told the stranger she's a pro at spotting lies, so as long as he stays honest, she'll totally believe him. He was so hyped to meet her that he actually asked for a hug. And while she was totally flattered, the girl in armor told him to quit stalling and start the story already. He figured life would be way easier if he could just spot lies, and then he dropped the news that he's actually from another world. Once he finally told the girls his name, once the guy finished his story, the church girl swore he was telling the truth, even though the girl in armor thought it sounded way too wild to be real. The guy starts rambling about how a bear and a slug tried to eat him, and he's scared he's gonna die, but the girl in the dress suddenly grabs his shoulders and cuts him off. She asked if he actually made it out of Black Demon Killer Mountain, but he had no clue it had such a wild name, and she warned him that even dragons don't survive there, so a human stands no chance. After hearing about the dragons, the guy was dying to see them for himself, but the girl explained that the bear he saw ate a fruit that makes you wander straight into the slug's lair without even realizing. The girl in armor pointed out the fruit he brought, and he just told her he had to scarf down a bunch because he was totally starving. The girl in the dress pointed out that since his mana was so low, the fruit's mind control barely even worked on him. Later, he checked his mana and felt totally normal, which was weird because he expected a regular guy like him to get some broken cheat powers like you see in stories. But the girl in the dress told him there was no way he had any powers because his mana levels were basically 0, and our guy was left wondering why he didn't get a cheat skill after. He realized he was basically a tiny bug in this new world who could get squashed at any second, especially since his only weapon was a pathetic wooden stick. He wasn't even mad about it, he was actually stoked because having 0 powers meant he was finally safe. Ilias was stunned he made it to the city with 0 gear, but the guy just reminded her he had his trusty stick the whole time. The girl in armor just grins and says she didn't know that was his weapon, so she literally used it for firewood, leaving the guy totally devastated since he's got nothing else left. Ilias told him he was lucky to be alive since mountain bandits usually kill everyone they find, but the guy shocked him by saying he'd actually seen one of those killers in the dark. Ilias double-checked to see if she heard him right, and the guy explained that while he was looking for a place to crash, he spotted some super sketchy dudes who looked exactly like bandits. The blonde girl grabs the guy by his collar and starts shaking him like crazy, demanding to know where the criminals are, and even though he's struggling to speak and begging her to stop, Ilias just can't chill out. The church lady yelled to snap the girl out of it, so the knight dropped the guy and rushed to apologize. He was absolutely fuming that Ilias almost got him killed with her powers, and now the girl in the dress is doubting if he can even find where those bandits were hiding. The guy said he knew the way because he'd carved a mark on a nearby tree. And the church girl got so excited she tried to hug him, but he told her to take it easy. Ilias couldn't just stand there watching the couple because she had to get a squad together for the mountains right away, and the girl in armor told the guy he was coming along to show them. The blonde girl turns around and finally introduces herself as Ilias Ratzel, a knight from the kingdom of Theiss, who's on a mission to hunt down the bandits hiding right inside that cave. Just 2 guys are guarding their secret base when one of them starts walking away, so the dark-haired dude asks where he's going, and his buddy just says he's got to go hit the bathroom. Left all by himself, the bandit was totally overguarding the cave and started wishing a beautiful girl would just appear in front of him instead. The guy was just snacking and complaining about the women selling stuff at the market, but his annoying rant was suddenly cut short. A spear flies out of nowhere and slams into the bandit's head, dropping him instantly before he can even react. Ilias leaps out of hiding and nails the criminal right in the head, while another knight grabs the second guy and warns him that the bandits use detection magic to figure out they've been caught. The kid was shocked the bandits had magic too, but Ilias told them to stay calm since the cave only had one exit, making it easy to wipe them all out in a flash. The dark-haired guy was shaking with nerves, but he decided to trust the knight since the blonde girl was a total powerhouse who clearly knew her stuff. Ilias wasn't the only one blowing his mind. The whole knight team was so fast and fearless that he realized every single one of these pros was a total beast. The blonde girl spun around and told him they had to go right now so he wouldn't get left behind. And even though he was scared out of his mind, he just followed her without a fight. The two stepped into the cave and saw a massive brawl between knights and bandits, where everyone was going all out to make sure the other side didn't stand a chance. The fight turned into a total bloodbath, and the guy scrambled to stay out of the line of fire while Ilya took charge, telling her squad to spare anyone who gave up but to hunt down anyone trying to bolt. The fight kept going until Ilya spotted the gang leader stepping out from the back of the cave, aiming to smash the girl with a huge stone weapon he'd made himself. The armored girl saw it coming and caught the strike with her right hand, asking him what he even expected to happen. Ilias just smirked at the guy like he was totally harmless, asking the gang leader why he was so huge if he couldn't even fight. The guy totally loses it, starts trash-talking her, and tries to yank his club back, but then the knight suddenly smashes the stone she's holding. Ilya didn't want to haul that massive body all the way back to the kingdom, so she headed straight to the cave to make the gang leader pay for everything he'd done. This armored girl took down her enemies in just one hit, and now her team and the dark-haired guy can't take their eyes off her. The knight fired off detection magic to hunt down the runners and grab the survivors, while the rest of the crew celebrated the win and got straight to work to finish the mission fast. The guy watching the fight finally let out a huge sigh of relief, and when a girl walked up to tell him everything went perfectly, he admitted he was actually terrified just being in that cave and seeing it all go down. Elias had no clue why the guy was so freaked out, especially since the legendary knights were absolutely crushing it and he should have been hyped. The guy was still dying to know one thing, so he rushed to ask her why Ilias never actually pulls her sword out of its sheath. She quickly made an excuse that she didn't want to get gross blood on her blade, but the guy called her out because he saw her fail to pull the sword out when it got totally stuck. The knight was totally speechless because the guy was being so helpful, but as the girl started getting really ticked off, he quickly ended the talk to stay out of her line of fire. Once the knights followed Ilias's orders, the mission was a wrap. They caught 7 bandits, the rest were taken out in the fight, and absolutely nobody escaped. While the team headed back to the kingdom, the guy realized he was actually getting used to Ilias carrying him around on her shoulder, but he was actually stressing over something else. Why was he even in this new world if he was just a regular guy who didn't inherit any cool powers? He figured some god probably just dragged him here on a total whim. But the why didn't even matter. He just really wanted to find the person who summoned him to this. This dude didn't care about taking over the world or building a harem. He just wanted a chill life with zero worries. But deep in the Thias Kingdom forest, a boss just got some. The guy just laughed it off since the bandits weren't idiots. And Decola, the boss of the Mountain Bandit Alliance, knew everyone was way more terrified of his temper than any knight's torture. With the mission finally over, Ilias heads to the Thetis palace and walks into the meeting room, where King Marito Thais thanks him and says the knights really crushed it this. She bowed and promised to keep following the king's orders, while the guy asked if she'd actually found any secrets yet. Ilias explained they were currently grilling the captured bandits, but since they weren't spilling any secrets yet, they needed more time. And right as the king finished listening, he noticed Lord Yi. The guy said he knew Lady Ratsall caught the villains, but since she couldn't handle the torture, the Lord was going to interrogate them himself. The room started buzzing with gossip, making the Lord rush to apologize. But he still pointed out that Ilias's tiny pro squad was totally outnumbered by Lord Leonardo's massive army. The guys warned the king that these prisoners weren't just some random dudes. They were actually brutal bandits who kept everyone living in total fear. The Lord looked at the girl and promised while Ilias is stuck dealing with everyone hating on her powers, we cut to the dark-haired guy who's finally sitting down for lunch because he's absolutely starving. Even though it was his first time eating food from another world, he actually thought it tasted great. And he didn't even complain about the weird spices when the old man apologized for the small meal. Last night, the knights got back from their mission and Ilias invited the guy to party with the team, but he totally turned them down. The kid asked for a place to crash since he hadn't slept in 2 days, so a man gave him some fresh clothes, showed him a bed, and then bolted out of there. Back in the present, he feels super lucky to have met such a nice old man and asks for his name, and the guy reveals he's Karagu Jesta Domi Trukovkin. The guy had no idea what the old man was saying, so he asked for his name again. Even after the old man repeated it, the dude was still totally lost. Seeing the look on his face, once he finished his meal, the man asked him to tag along, and after he agreed, they headed straight to Ilias. She said sorry for the trouble and asked him for some tips because she couldn't get the prisoners to talk, so he asked if she was still trying to grill them for answers. Elias told her the questioning was still going on because the bandits wouldn't spill how they talked to each other, and he smirked, teasing her that he didn't think such a... Ilias let out a massive sigh and told them that things were way more complicated than they looked. The girl warned them that even traps are useless because these bandits use magic to stay far away from any real warriors. These bad guys had detection magic that worked like a radar, letting them sense anyone with mana nearby. The guy asks why the knights aren't using magic, so Ilias explains the bandits have anti-magic stones, and the girl drops a round one on the table to show him exactly how it works. Ilias explains that these stones literally shut down magic, and since the price depends on the size, even a kid could buy a small one, leaving our guy totally shocked that such a powerful item is so... He says mages get zero respect because of items like this. But Elias explains that even though warriors can use magic, there's always a stone nearby that shuts it down the second a fight breaks out. He realized one spell was totally impossible to pull off here, and he couldn't believe this new world was just as cruel as his old one. The guy thought they could use hypnosis magic to get some answers, but she told him these bandits were totally immune to it. Wait, the prompt says one line in equals one line out. The input is one paragraph/line. Final version. Since those bandits had tiny anti-thief, the dark-haired guy offered to help and said he'd handle the interrogation himself. But the second he sat down, the bandit totally lost his cool and demanded to know who he was. He tried to stay chill and avoid getting violent, but the guy just shut him down and said he'd rather die than spill any secrets. He took a good look at the guy and realized his body was covered in old scars that looked like they came from some brutal torture. The kid starts acting totally chill and tells the bandit he's basically a dead man walking, but the bandit doesn't even flinch since he's always ready to go out. Our guy. He told the guy his bandit crew would forget him the second he kicked the bucket, so he might as well spill some secrets now. And he honestly couldn't believe this dude wasn't even. He started trash-talking the guy, telling him he could just keep his mouth shut if he wanted. The guy snapped back, asking what would even change if he talked, but the kid stuck to his guns and said he'd just be hyped to hear anything at all. He even adds that if he's satisfied, he'll stop the torture so the guy can go out peacefully without any more pain. Watching the bandit's reaction, the guy threatened to just walk out and let the knights back in if he didn't start talking, totally baiting him to see what he'd do next. He wouldn't back down and just kept repeating himself, totally sure that even if he died, nothing would actually change. The bandit grabbed his head in a panic, saying someone terrified his crew so much that he'd rather be tortured to death than spill any secrets. The guy finally realized why the criminal was keeping his mouth shut. There was someone out there way scarier than even death itself. Once our guy got the info from the bandit, he tracked down Maya at the church to see if she knew any magic that could actually change a dead person's soul. The girl in the dress rushes over to hug the guy, thinking Ilias was bullying him, but the knight swears she didn't do a thing, and the guy even steps back to tell everyone she's totally innocent. The girl in the dress says that magic is totally real and can actually bring back the dead, but Maya mentions it's been lost for ages, and the guy just says that obviously everyone would want a power like that. Maya got dead serious and warned him to never say that out loud, because in some places, just saying he wants her could get him executed on the spot. He's totally shocked and asks how dangerous she really is, so she tells him her magic only brings pain. She explains that people tried using her to bring back the dead, but it always ended in a total disaster. Maya warned the guy that everyone who tries to revive the dead just turns into a demon lord, leaving him completely frozen and speechless. He couldn't believe someone like that actually existed, but then it clicked. If coming back to life turns you into a demon lord, it's no wonder that magic is totally banned. Maya also revealed that on top of this forbidden magic, there's another technique called the dead spirit spell. While helping her with the books, he asks about a spell, and Maya explains it can drag a dead person's soul back to the living world just to humiliate them. This magic lets you puppet the dead or use them for sacrifices, making it easily the most twisted and evil power out there. After thinking it over, the guy asks the church girl if people brought back to life are still awake inside, and she's totally stunned because that's a super heavy question to ask. The guy quickly promised he was only asking for all those details because he wanted to know exactly what made the situation so scary. Maya tells the guy she's actually dealt with this magic before, back when she and her squad had to take out a bunch of monsters spawned by that same spell. Most of these monsters just scream and vanish into thin air, but one of them acts totally different. And right as Maya finishes it off, the creature actually looks at her and thanks her for ending its life. The dark-haired guy hung on every word the church girl said, then gave her a quick bow to thank her for the story. Once the guy left, Maya told Elias to keep an eye on him because he was way too into creepy stuff, but she knew deep down he wasn't a villain, just someone who might lose his way. The guy finally reached the prisoners and flashed a smirk, telling them that he's the one asking the questions now. The criminals weren't listening and just wanted them gone right away, but the guy was so over all the death talk that he straight up asked if they were really that scared of a dead spirit spell. The bandits were on edge at first, but then they started acting like they had no clue what he was saying, so he just kept talking. He got super serious and told them that since he knew exactly what kind of trouble they were in, he was going to give them a whole new offer. The bandits thought they were finally getting off the hook, but he told them their execution was only on hold until they dealt with the person who put that spell on them. The thugs tried to talk back, but he shut them down, telling them that if they helped him, they could at least die as humans instead of monsters. These guys were finally stressing over what he said, even though they used to think he was a joke, so he told them to just be real with him. The kid adds that talking is a total win for the prisoners since it makes their boss mad and keeps them alive. He promised that even though they're stuck in prison, nobody's going to torture them, so they can finally die as humans instead of monsters while getting some peace to think about their lives. The bandits weren't buying his story, so he tried to convince them he wasn't just there to end them. But one thug argued it wasn't worth the risk since He said there was zero risk since the bandits knew they were totally cornered. And even though the knights just stumbled onto the hideout by pure luck, they were still scratching their heads about how they actually found it. If the knights find the leader's hideout like this, he's totally going to think someone in the gang snitched on it. He stared them down and asked what their boss would do next, knowing the leader suspects anyone the knights catch, leaving the bandit totally frozen in fear. He basically told them they have two options: die peacefully right now, or end up as mindless puppets for the wrong people. He told them the deal was only on the table until tomorrow and hoped they'd make the right choice. Then he headed out while the knights dragged those bandits off to the dungeon. Just as he's leaving the meeting, he runs right into his grandpa and a girl in armor, and since they're staring at him like he's a total weirdo, he gets super delayed. The older guy realized the kid was such a smooth talker he could easily run a massive scam, but that definitely wasn't the life he wanted. Ilias asked if the criminals would talk tomorrow, but the guy didn't think they'd say a word and instead had a favor to ask Grandpa Karg. The guy had a plan and told them to listen up, and since the girl was super curious, she caught every single word. But once he finally spilled his secret, Ilias was completely... The young guy swore everything was normal, and since they were out of options, Grandfather Cargo agreed. But Ilias still wasn't feeling the plan. After a while, the guy in the dungeon started complaining because they split him up from his crew, leaving him with no one to even talk to. As the bandit tried to figure out his next move, he remembered how Dakota showed them the terrifying reality of what happens when you don't follow orders. The bandit boss showed everyone exactly what happens to traitors, making the locals way too terrified to help the knights, and when the guards swapped shifts, Grandfather Cargo asked if anyone had confessed, but the knight said the prisoners weren't saying a single word. The bandit was stoked that his crew didn't backstab him, and since the knight delayed the execution, they were going to need way more food to keep the prisoners fed. Grandfather Cargo didn't care, saying they'd only delay it for 3 people and finish off the rest soon so they wouldn't waste any resources. The bandit started sweating as Gramps Cargo explained that since everyone would just spill the same info, they only needed to keep 3 of them alive. After hearing the guards talk, the bandit finally realized what that young interrogator was getting at. Because their boss is so paranoid, he'll just blame everyone who got caught anyway. The criminal finally cracked and called the guard over, saying he'd spill all the secrets if they brought that young interrogator back right away. Grandpa Cargo asked why they couldn't just talk tomorrow, making the bandit totally lose it, but the guard pointed out the kid was fast asleep, so they should just write their thoughts down. The guy hands over a pen and paper, and even though the bandit starts to panic, the fear of what happens to people who die makes him spill every secret he knows for the knights. The bandit was totally cursing, but he still scribbled down everything he knew about his leader while Grandpa Cargo stood over him and watched his every move. The next morning, Elisa reveals that 5 of the 7 thugs are finally ready to spill the beans. So while our guy finishes his breakfast, he decides he's going to head back and get the full story. The guy tried to get the prisoners to confess, but when the girl wouldn't say a word, he gave her a super confused look. Elias wasn't ready to let go of those sheets yet, so he looked the guy in the eye and asked what his life was like before he ever stepped foot in the new world. She knew absolutely nothing about his past because he kept everything a secret, making her super suspicious of his real goals, especially since he loved using people's weaknesses against them. Ilias points out that only criminals act like that, but the guy jumps in to stop her, insisting he's just a normal guy who wants a chill life. The girl in armor was totally stunned because she couldn't wrap her head around why he'd use such a crazy way to get answers. He didn't even sweat the accusations, telling them that a peaceful life is all about avoiding drama and staying out of trouble. Back in his old world, there were tons of ways to see how other people thought, but meeting so many new faces was always a total hit or miss. To survive a normal life, you've got to know how to fight off creeps and blend in, which is exactly how our guy spent his entire past life. Ilias was totally confused about who this guy really was since he acted like a different person with her versus those bandits, but he just shrugged and said he changes his vibe depending on who's standing in. He pointed out that Ilias always acts like a noble knight, which is the big difference between them, and even though the girl thinks he'll turn bad if he faces evil, he promises. The blonde girl was totally speechless after what he said, so she just watched him sip his tea until she finally picked up her mug and told him she finally understood everything. Looking at that twisted mirror, the guy just gave a creepy smirk, and as they finished their tea, the girl realized that living a normal life is actually way harder than it looks. Maya got the 3 of them together and told them she'd finally figured things out after looking over everything the criminals said. Word on the street is the bandits teamed up to form a massive group called the Bandit Alliance, and they're led by a one-armed guy who uses forbidden magic. May reveals that the Alliance leader is Dakota, a former royal assassin who went rogue and committed a string of crimes across Garn before finally landing in the kingdom of Thias. He realized Diokola was just using his old criminal tricks, so taking him down would be easy once he figured out his habits. Elias snapped him out of his thoughts to say the guy looked like a total villain, and Maya totally agreed once she looked at the facts. When he finally hit the streets, he saw that the kingdom of Thais was actually super wealthy and thriving. He remembered he never even saw the streets because Ilias stuffed him in a bag, and he hasn't been allowed outside since then. He figured the king was a solid leader, and Ilias confirmed that the royals have always looked out for their people, which is why the girl is so hyped to serve as a knight and protect the kingdom. Ilias warned that as the kingdom got richer and more merchants showed up, some real creeps would start sneaking into Tlice too, and they'd have to handle them. He warns her that this bandit gang is way too big to catch, so she just decides to call in every single one of Lord Ragdow's knights. Lord Ragdow is a legendary general for the Thais kingdom, and Ilias used to work right under him. So when the guy asks how many knights she's leading, she admits he asked if they could get other squads to join them and make things easier. But Ilias's mood totally tanked when he heard that. She realized he was totally right, and that her reputation wasn't worth more than her life. So she finally decided to ask for help. Elias knew she had to keep the citizens safe above all else, so she immediately called a meeting to get the other squads to back her up. He asked if they could meet at the barracks, and when she asked why, he reminded her that he's just a random guy she found, so there's no way he's getting into the castle. This guy was dead serious about the case, so he wouldn't let anyone talk about his plan unless he was right there in the room. Once Ilias heard his offer, she waited until it was bug. She thanked everyone for meeting up so late and immediately started explaining why she called them all there. The Lord cut the girl off before she could explain, then turned to the crowd and demanded to know how many knights the commanders were sending to help Ilias. Ragdow listened to his crew and decided that since he had the biggest squad with 300 knights, he was the one who had to lead the charge. The young guy realized the Lord was a total snake who just wanted to steal the credit, and Grandfather Cargo explained that some guys would never respect Ilias's skills just because she's Hidda. While the commanders were busy arguing, he realized it didn't matter if a guy or girl was in charge, because the only thing that actually mattered was getting the job done. Grandpa Karg was totally fed up with everyone picking on Ilias and didn't trust her with the case anymore, so he pointed at the young guy and told him to speak up just to shut eye. The whole room went dead silent as everyone stared at the guy they hadn't even noticed, and Lord Ragdow asked the old man who he actually was. The old man shot back that since the kid gave the knights the intel on the bandits, he definitely earned the right to speak his mind. The Lord asked if he had a problem with the order, but he just said it made total sense to pick the guy with the biggest army. If the Lord wanted to lead the whole army, he had to learn every little trick. So the young guy slapped a map onto the table to show him exactly what he was thinking. He showed them the bandit routes on the map and told the squad they needed to figure out everyone's roles right now. The Lord saw the guy was totally ready for this talk, so he confirmed the kid would be in charge of the area where the big boss stays. He kept assigning squads to the other leaders to cover every inch of the map, but when he asked who wanted to team up with Ilias, the whole room just went dead silent. The guy kept his cool and put Lady Razzle on reserve to handle the trade road supplies, making her squad the ultimate backup if the main teams couldn't get the job done. Ragdow was totally down with the guy's choice and told him to keep running the army. But Elias was about to get blindsided by what happened next. The girl was losing her mind with the mission kicks off and he tries to talk some sense into her, but she totally shuts him out even though she knows the supply squad is the most important part of the plan. Forget her bad mood? The guy was actually panicking because she was zooming ahead and refused to carry him like she usually did. He was still waiting for some epic new world powers to kick in, but they never showed up, while Grandpa Kargu apologized to Elias for not having her back. The knights were just chatting away when the guy's legs totally gave out, and while the supply team was still hiking through the woods, Lord Ragdow's squad was already in a full-blown yit. The thugs were totally clueless about how the knights tracked them down, so they tried to hide and warn their boss, but the squad leader just ordered his men to take everyone out and leave 0 survivors. He walked into the bandit camp and told them he couldn't even imagine how useful that guy's document was actually going to be. The Lord was super impressed with how this random kid handled himself at the meeting, and he couldn't believe Lady Ratzal actually got those bandits to spill their secrets. The Lord loved that she actually came to him for help, and now that she's under his protection, he's ready to make his family name more legendary than ever. The commander's focus snapped when he noticed something super weird hidden behind the tent. There was definitely someone under that cloth, but they weren't moving at all. Once the Lord spotted the corpse suddenly jumped back to life, And that's when the Lord realized those bandits from the camp were hit with a death spirit spell. Two thugs managed to ditch the knights and rushed back to tell their boss, Ducola, that they'd been betrayed, and Ducola was absolutely livid that someone actually had the guts to turn on him. But the guy didn't even flinch. He just gave a creepy smile and said he had a backup plan for this exact moment. The fight was getting intense as the knights charged at these criminals who, Lord Ragdow and his squad were right in the middle of the fight, but he couldn't figure out how the enemy was still using magic when they had anti-magic stones, and those monsters were way more useful since they could survive hits that would kill a human instantly. The commander warned his squad to watch their backs because if a knight dies, they'll just turn into a monster, and the Lord mentioned how magic is the only way to truly wipe out the undead. The gang leader tried to bolt with his crew, but the Lord spotted them and ordered a chase, while the commander realized that if his men died, they'd just turn into dangerous monsters and attack their... As the fight broke out, Ducolo bolted from the camp, muttering that people are way more useful once they're dead, while a confused lackey asked the boss how his magic was still working against those anti-magic stones. The big boss explained that anti-magic stones don't actually erase magic. They just snap the connections holding it together, and since his henchman was totally lost, Ducola added that the death spirit spell is on a whole different level because it's forbidden. This spell shoves a soul into a corpse to make a zombie that once wiped out whole countries, and the best part is these monsters leak mana that powers up all the other zombies nearby. The gang leader didn't care if the knights had the stones or not, because as long as there were dead bodies lying around, he could just keep making more zombies. Ducola stashed a bunch of zombies in a barrier right by the camp, and the second those stones get close, the barrier's gonna shatter so the undead can swarm a squad of knights. To totally freak out his subordinate, the man warned him that standing near a dying person means you'll 100% turn into a zombie, even if someone else takes you out first. The guy was so terrified he almost fumbled the bag, but Dakota told him to be careful with that treasure, even admitting he was actually thankful for the knights. Dopola realized that more survivors meant less loot for him, so he figured the fewer teammates left standing, the richer he'd be. Ilias cut the guy's speech short when she saw the thugs running away, but she wasn't happy about it at all, even though the D.A. Cola family was super thankful to the knights. The girl in armor stood on a hill, finally looking down at the targets she'd been hunting for ages. Her whole squad was right there behind her, ready for a fight. Ilias. This guy definitely didn't think he'd run into the Royal Knights ever again. He wasn't even scared, though, just telling the girl straight up that she was dead wrong. Elias didn't. Cola stops and demands to know who leaked his secret escape route, but even though Ilias says she found it herself, he doesn't believe her for a second. This guy couldn't believe that some girl totally exposed his secret plan and used the other knights as bait just to catch Doko herself. The boss made it clear he wasn't looking for some snobby noble, since he knew a guy who actually understood the struggle of the streets. And right as he said that, the dark-haired dude, he stepped in front of the girl and told the old man he'd handle it, leaving the villain totally stunned because this guy didn't look like a fighter at all. The guy didn't even try to deny it, straight up admitting he was definitely the weakest one in the room. The bandit leader demands to know how the kid found their hideout, but the guy just says he got lucky and stumbled onto them while he was lost in the mountains. The guy thought that was hilarious and asked how he even made a deal with those thugs, so our hero just kept it real and told him exactly how he did it. The leader asked if he thought people had a real purpose, and the kid basically said they only matter as long as they're useful. After a quick talk, the bad guy asked one final question. What kind of magic did the kid use to track him down? He looked the guy dead in the eye and told him it was called understanding, and the bandit boss actually seemed to like that answer. He totally saw it coming that the one-armed guy would try to run mid-fight since he knew he was outmatched, so it was no surprise he had an escape route ready to go. The kid finally figured out the leader was using a death spirit spell to keep the bandits terrified, but he was already planning one more hunt before the mission since they hadn't found a single body all day. There's no way a ruthless bandit leader is burying people out of pity, so the guy starts wondering what he's actually doing with all those bodies. He figured that if the bodies were gone, they were probably just moved somewhere else to be put to use. The criminal boss stared at the kid and told him he'd make a legendary villain, but the boy just shrugged and said he was a totally normal civilian. The leader didn't buy it because normal people just don't get how a total scumbag thinks, so he asked the kid where he was from, and after the boy said only criminals get to do whatever they want, the man finally realized who he was talking to and flashed a super creepy smile. The man stared at the kid's dark hair and eyes again, claiming he'd definitely lived on Earth before, but the boy just couldn't believe what he was hearing. The guy's reaction gave it all away, and the villain smirked because he finally knew she was actually real. Our hero was totally shocked and asked how a random bandit even knew about Earth. The bandit totally lost it, screaming that the death spirit spell ruined his life and brought darkness to the world, and he blamed the Earth for everything, even the magic used to bring back the dead. It turns out Earth was actually the cursed parallel world where every forbidden technique was born, and hearing the bandit say it left both the young man and Ilias completely floored. The guy was totally blown away that a regular human from Earth actually invented resurrection magic. And since Ilias looked completely clueless, he figured there was no point in lying to a doll anyway. Since the bandit had some serious intel, our hero figured he'd want to stay alive. So he asked him for more secrets about Earth, but the guy claimed he was all out of info. The bad guy told the kid to go figure things out on his own since he had a lot to think about, then thanked him for the cool chat before suddenly pulling a knife and lunging at him. The attack totally fails as Ilias blocks it just in time, sending 2 knives clattering to the floor, and he's completely shocked because his opponent is doing all this with only one hand. The girl in armor told him to stay put so she could keep him safe, and he was totally down with that. Dakota ordered his crew to charge the knights, threatening to turn anyone who chickened out into a zombie, and he had to jump into the fight too since the knights were already gunning. Ilias was totally overwhelming this guy who was struggling to defend himself with just one hand. But once Dakota finally pushed her back, he actually praised her and said he'd never seen anyone with that kind of power before. She totally ignored his compliments since he was clearly just having a blast, and even though he was salty she wouldn't play along, he had to admit she was the perfect leader for her squad. After a quick chat, the group pulls another knife trick and tosses it way up into the air. But when it starts glowing with creepy dark energy, Ilias sees the danger and tells a knight to shield. The guy thought he was safe and relaxed when a magic knight showed up, but then Ilias revealed that Dakota had actually used a terrifying death spirit spell. The bandit leader gave her props for being so smart again, but he quickly reminded her that his crew was ready to do whatever he ordered. Right after Dokal finishes talking, a massive monster swings a giant sword at Ilias, but she blocks the hit and realizes she's already beaten this guy back in the cave, the gang leader realized she didn't have a sacred weapon, making it way harder for her to fight the undead, especially since the death spirit spell was about to lock down the area and keep those monsters attacking even if the doll gets taken out. Ilias didn't even blink. She just raised her sword and said she'd take down every last one of them to end this. Then she looked at her squad and told them it was time to start jumping. The kid was totally confused by Ilias's plan and couldn't believe how high those knights were jumping. But Dakota finally caught on and started spamming anti-magic balls, screaming that, even with a ton of anti-magic stones right in front of her, she just shrugged and said she wasn't planning on using magic anyway. Ilias only cared about the main source of the mess, so she wiped out all that creepy undead energy with one single hit and left everyone absolutely stunned. The armored girl was fighting like a total boss and reading the battlefield perfectly, while Ilias told Okal to use every dirty trick to end the fight fast. And when he actually agreed, the bandit dropped a smokescreen that caught everyone off guard, making the girl scream when she realized he was just dodging her, and he didn't even hide it. He straight up told her he was just trying to bail. The second the bandit stepped away from the girl, a spear came flying out of the trees and nailed him. Dakota was hurt so bad he couldn't even get off the ground. He looked at Ein. The man realized Dakota totally saw his escape coming, since he'd already ditched the knights before. But Dakota just watched him, knowing everything was going exactly as planned since he'd already warned Grandpa Cog. He knew the perfect time to strike was right when Dakolia started calling out his mistakes, giving him the perfect chance to make a run for it. The bandit asked if that was the same trick the kid used, but he was actually glad that the guy who saw through his plan was the one who took him down. Dakola tells the guy they totally could have been friends, but the dude shuts him down fast because he can't stand killers. He insisted he'd never wander off the path on purpose. So the man changed the subject to the bandit's gear, where a map was hidden showing a super secret location. The man told him it was a parting gift since he actually found him interesting, and the kid was blown away by how chill and happy this criminal was acting. Nicola asks for the guy's name and he's about to answer, but it's way too late because Ilias is already raising his sword over the bandit's head. Right before he died, the bandit finally heard the guy's name and actually cracked a smile. But Ilias ended the chat early by slicing his head clean off. Ilias wiped the blood off her sword and asked the guy if he had anything to say since that enemy definitely knew about his homeworld, but he just said the man accepted his fate and took his punishment. He figured he wouldn't learn anything else, but he still wished Dakota lived a bit longer, even though he knew the girl had to take him out before he tried to escape or fight back again. Yelius argued that he was way too beat up to keep fighting, but he still defended the girl, saying she was innocent because he was the one coming up with all the plans to catch the bandit. She kept arguing, admitting his plan actually worked even though she hated it, so he took a deep breath and told her he'd finally listened to why she finished off Dokowal, while Ilias apologized and said she was scared at first, but then she quickly corrected herself, saying she was actually just grossed out by how those guys looked while talking to the criminal. She brought up that story about the crooked mirror to him, and ever since he heard about Dakota, he's been acting exactly like the guy, which made Elise even more worried after they finally... She realized if they kept talking, he'd totally take the guy's side, so she just couldn't hold back anymore. He realized he and Dakota actually understood each other even though she was a killer, and instead of judging her, he thanked her for keeping him on the right track. Ilias was totally beating herself up for being so reckless, but the guy just hyped her up and told her she actually made the right call. He saw that she didn't just rush in, she actually thought ahead, and he had to admit, that was a total pro move. Ilias finally chilled out, but she was super confused why he was talking down to her like a little kid until he pointed out that he's actually older. She was totally shocked by his question, and after she told him Ilias was 18, he just confirmed that he was older than her. She couldn't believe he was actually older and thought he must be part elf, but he just told her he's a totally normal guy. Thinking about how he talked to her, Ilias guessed he was only 16, especially since he was Japanese and totally looked like a teenager. As soon as she found out their age gap, she started apologizing like crazy, but he just told her not to sweat it. Ilias was totally lost, so he figured he should just start acting like a real adult. Ilias was totally caught off guard by his sudden serious vibe, making her blush as she agreed he should start acting more mature. And once the mission was wrapped up, they hitched a ride in a cart to avoid walking home. The Knights totally crushed the rest of the bases without losing a single man. And with Maya's help, they wiped out every last zombie. And even though some guys got pretty banged up, not one person from Lord Ragdo's squad actually died. He figured Leonore was a solid fighter who just lacked some serious chill. And then he found out they were actually putting Duck Hall's head on display for everyone to see. What really freaked him out was that people actually knew about Earth and were already cooking up forbidden techniques there. He realized right then that he was still miles away from having a chill, normal life in this new world. As the army marched back to the Thais kingdom, deep in the mountain forests, a guy with animal ears and a tail was hiding out in a tent. As soon as it got dark, the guy peeked out from his hiding spot, but he had zero clue what his next move was. A while later, the guy finally wakes up in a normal bed in his own room. And as he sits up, he realizes this is the first time he's actually felt rested since landing in this world. Even though the mission was over, his muscles were totally killing him, making him think back to the conversation he had with Ilias right after they got back to the kingdom. When she asks what his plan is, he says he needs permission to stay in the country, but she tells him not to worry because it'll be a total breeze. Our main man decides it's time to find a real home and asks Ilias for some advice. Then, he remembers he's still under that weird spell, so he starts grinding. The girl tells him he can't just do whatever he wants, so he figures he might as well go back to prison where he at least gets free food. Ilias let out a long sigh and promised the guy a much better deal, even letting him crash at her place until he found a real spot to stay. Ilias told him she had extra rooms and he could stay for free, so he was totally stoked and agreed right away. She started getting suspicious that he planned this whole thing since he agreed way too fast. But he swore he just wanted to avoid drama and that living with her would make his life way easier. After getting dropped into a new world with literally nothing, our main guy is starting his life over in a room near the market, thanks to a kind dude named Ilias. He was tired of staying home, so he went out to explore, hiding his super noticeable black hair before reaching a market full of people selling fresh stuff from their gardens. The money system was super simple. Copper was worth 100 yen, silver was 1,000, and gold was 10,000. So shopping felt exactly like being back home in Japan. Our guy is just wandering the market, wondering why he can't find any salty snacks, when suddenly a girl in a huge rush crashes right at his feet, her basket of fruits and veggies. She stood up and thanked him, saying she was totally fine. But she started panicking when she saw the basket she'd wrecked, so he stepped in to keep her out of trouble. He set a basket in front of her and told her to pack it all up, and that's when she realized he'd actually bought every single thing she'd accidentally broken. Not wanting to, she thanked him for the save and introduced herself as Saira as they reached her tavern, the Dogbone. But while he was busy acting like the name was lame, someone suddenly shoved him. A man steps out of the building and demands to know who this guy is, but once she explains everything, he finally chills out and realizes the dude was actually helping. Once the tavern owner realized the kid was actually a good dude, he introduced himself as Gauze and tried to pay for the basket, but the guy just asked for a hot meal instead of the cash. Sayers straight up told her the food was trash, But since he was stuck there anyway, he started asking the girl for some info about the new city while he waited for his meal. Cyrus was actually grinding through school and working as a waitress just to save up and open her very own clothing store. She says no one will take her as an apprentice, so she's teaching herself and using every cent she makes to buy clothes and sew her own stuff. Sayara was grinning because she was having a blast, and the guy immediately saw just how much positive energy his new friend had. He started feeling pretty down, realizing they were total opposites, but she snapped him out of it by asking where he was from and where he was crashing. The guy felt refreshed and grabbed a room to crash, but as soon as he revealed he was Ilias Ratzel from the Ragdow squad, the owner and the waitress were totally stunned. They were losing their minds that he was talking about someone who could level a whole forest in one swing, and even though he had no idea his friend was a total legend, Sira made it clear that literally everyone in the country knew exactly who she was. She also bragged about how Lady Ilias totally dominated the Thigh Swordsman tournament and crushed every knight in her way. And even though the guy tried to change the subject by bringing up the old hat, turns out his grandpa is actually the legendary Lord of the Spear and one of the top 5 masters in the world, making our guy feel totally outclassed by all these famous legends. When Sayara asks, the girl said she was dying to see Lady Elias fight, but she totally slumped when the guy told her that real combat is actually a pretty ugly sight. He saw how upset she was and immediately regretted being so heavy with her. Suraya kept insisting that Lady Laios is actually amazing, even though a ton of people totally hate her. She quickly promised. To cheer up his new friend, he told her not to worry because Elasi always crushes the bad guys. And hearing that totally made Syra beam with joy again. Gaz serves up the meal and the guy thinks about bringing Eli since she's got people backing her, but the second he takes a bite, he spits it right out, making Syra ask if it's actually that gross. The food tasted so gross that he decided he'd only bring Elias back when the tavern actually had something edible, while Syra just reminded him that she'd totally warned him it would be nasty. After meeting Goss and Syra, the guy headed back to the church to ask Maya for help, and she was totally shocked by how fast he was making new friends. Since the church food he had the other day was actually pretty decent, he told Maya everything about Guza and asked her to teach him how to cook at least one killer meal. He noticed his new friends were totally frozen in shock, so he asked Maya if she was actually some kind of famous celebrity. The gods were losing their minds that this guy actually asked the church leader for cooking lessons. But then Maya dropped a bombshell that she used to be a demon slayer and told him she was totally free now that. Maya starts getting ready and says the newbies usually handle the boring paperwork, so since she's down, he leaves Goza in her hands and mentions that salt isn't even sold in this country. The girl says salt is basically a luxury only the rich nobles can afford. The guy tells her that back where he's from, salt is super common and anyone can get it. Maya decides. The guy asked her to spill all the details on the seller and then wanted the lowdown on that carrier spell. Maya was totally shocked by the second part of the request and asked if he was okay, but the guy just said he was curious about how long it would actually last. Maya says the magic only lasts a week, so they've got 4 days left before she has to cast the spell all over again. Seeing her reaction, he asked if the spell was broken, but after a second he realized she was totally messing with him. Maya admitted it's been forever since she used that spell, so she's pretty sure she totally messed it up on the guy. She tells him it's no big deal, but when he asks about the side effects, she says his muscles are going to start hurting like crazy in a bit. She knew the muscle pain wouldn't hit instantly, but would get way worse later. And once she explained the side effects, he finally realized why he woke up feeling so wrecked. Suddenly, the guy's hit with a fresh wave of pain and begs Maya to heal him, but she says it's impossible, making him let out a scream that echoes through the whole church. He didn't waste any time hitting the shops with Sarah, and as soon as they got there, a girl met them at the door and told them to follow her. The girl leads the pair into a room to wait, and right on cue, the big boss walks in and introduces himself as Ban, the guy in charge of the trading company. Ban read the letter and realized the salt was the only reason people were coming for him, but he wasn't feeling it when the man offered Maya's friends a discount. The kid told him he wasn't just looking for a cheap deal, he wanted to lower salt prices for the entire country. And the man was so blown away by his guts that he asked, "In this world, just 1 kilo of salt costs a gold coin worth 10,000 yen. And our main character has no clue why it's so hard to get." He remembers what Maya told him and explains that back home, salt is such a big deal that people have literally fought massive wars over it. She explains that it's all thanks to magic energy, since the crops are packed with it and the soil makes those nutrients even stronger. He figured out the magic was actually inside the minerals, and Maya was confused why the guy had so little power, wondering if he just hadn't eaten enough. And since salt isn't a big deal here yet, it's still treated like a total luxury, but the kid is dead set on making everyone want it. The guy suggested more deliveries would lower the price, and Ban was all for it. But the man said the discount wouldn't happen instantly and asked for his thoughts. As night fell, the Dogbone Tavern started filling up with thirsty customers, and Sire was busy serving up drinks and new snacks for everyone to try. The guy noticed a dish he didn't even order, but when he asked the waitress what it was, she told him it was just part of the tavern's brand new menu. Sarah told them to dig in since it was all free, but the guys knew Gauze was the cook, and they weren't touching that stuff. The guys were totally shocked by how good it tasted and couldn't believe Gauze actually made it, since that extra salt made the potatoes and chips way more delicious. He came up with a genius plan to hand out free snacks to lure people in, and it worked like a charm. Sierra was hyped that the guests were finally ordering real food instead of just cheap booze, and the young guy bragged about how their meeting with BAN was a massive success. Sierra made the kid look so serious that Ban was hyped to meet him, and they totally lucked out because the guy was actually super polite. Their talk got cut short when a bunch of hungry customers started calling for the waitress to try all the new food. And as word spread about the menu, Sierra ended up working her tail off until way past dark. Once they finally closed, the girl just collapsed on the table because she'd never worked a shift that insane. And Goss apologized for making the guy help out since he totally didn't expect that many people to show up. While the guy is busy working at the tavern, Ilias is stuck eating dinner all by herself, and she's totally stressed because it's getting super late and he's still not home yet. She pushed those thoughts out of her head and just assumed he'd be back the next day. When morning rolled around, the guy's muscles were totally aching again and he was stuck with, Gauze fixed the whole mess by hiring a squad of grandmas led by Cargo's bossy wife, and the next morning while grabbing salt at the bathhouse, our guy ran into an old man and told him everything about the tavern trouble. The old man told him to ask his wife for help with the bandages, and even though the guy didn't think his grandma could do much, Cargo promised she was a total firecracker who'd already rounded up a whole squad of other wives to help. This lady was a total powerhouse and jumped at the guy's offer because she was sick of being stuck at home. He asks if she can handle working all day, and she just says her husband doesn't want her to be lonely, so everything's going to be fine. He realized it was actually super easy for her to find a job, and it would finally stop her husband from feeling so guilty. She kicked the guys out of the tavern so they wouldn't mess with her job, and since the weather was great, the young dude and the old man decided to just go for a walk. He pulled out the card and showed it to Grandpa Karga, who was totally confused until he explained that those marks showed exactly where Dakota hid the treasure and where all the bandit bases and caves. Right before he died, the bandit blabbed about a secret hidden at one of the bases, so the kid figured it had to be something from Earth. After checking the map, he realized the hogs. He asks where the original maps went, and the old man explains that Elias took them to Lord Ragdo to give to the king. He knew the second the king got that map, the bases were toast, and Grandfather Cargo said the journey would kick off in just a few days. He wasn't sure if he had time to look around and was totally shocked when the old man told him to leave right now, but Grandfather Cargo knew he was dying to see the criminal's gift, so he handed the card back on. The kid wasn't sure if they could just go treasure hunting, but the old man told him they had to move fast before it was banned, so they grabbed their horses and headed out to track down some bandit hideouts. Once they hit the forest, they ditched the animals to move faster, and when the guy worried they'd get hurt, the man promised those horses could totally hold their own in a fight. The guy asked if those beastly horses would actually attack a random person, but the old man promised him everything was totally fine. As they trekked through the woods, the kid asked if he really took down a wyvern just by chucking a helmet at it, and the old man was blown away that the kid even knew such an old story. He agreed and chucked his helmet instead, thinking it was a total waste to throw his spear at a flying monster since the hag loved that weapon way too much. Once the old man finished his story, he cleared the branches and told the guy to follow him right to the cave entrance that was marked in a totally different color on the map. Grandpa Cargu told the guy to stay sharp as they lit a torch and headed inside. But it turned out the cave was actually super quiet with nothing dangerous in sight. The floor was covered in straw and battle gear like knives and magic stones, but hidden inside a drawer full of gems was a mysterious old diary. He grabbed the ancient book and realized it was Do Coyle's actual diary. But when he saw the writing on it, he completely froze, making the old man ask what was wrong. Grandpa leaned in for a closer look but couldn't read a single word. So the guy stepped up and explained it was all in Japanese, meaning he was the only one who knew what it actually said. The old man was totally lost and asked if Japanese was his first language back home. And the guy said yeah, pointing out that the diary is actually the fourth set of the Blue Demon King's secret spy records. The kid and the old guy stared at the book that finally appeared in their hands. It was the fourth volume of notes on the Blue Demon King. This was definitely the goodbye gift Dokula was talking. He was totally losing it thinking about how a regular earthling actually used a forbidden resurrection spell to create a literal demon king. He was clutching a totally trashed book with the title label barely hanging on. And when he turned to the hag, his serious face showed he had some major news to drop. The old guy was totally shocked to hear the kid was from another world, but he still chose to trust him. The boy begged him to keep the whole thing a secret and not tell anyone what happened. The old man didn't want to ruin their bond, so he just asked the kid what he actually wanted to do. This totally caught the boy off guard, but he admitted he really wanted to read the book, just not right this second. The old man warns him that he's about to miss his only shot, but the boy says reading it would just leave him all by himself. If this book ever gets out, the entire show. The kid grinned while talking about how much he trusts grandfather Karg, even though he'd be tortured if anyone found out. And when he asked for a favor, the old man looked up like he already knew exactly what was coming. The old man promised he'd get the book straight to Lord Ragdo, telling the kid he could totally count on him. The boy gave a quick smile and handed the book over. He kept telling himself this was the right move, especially since Kargu is a legendary knight everyone respects, and it would be a total disaster if the guy saw what was inside that book. Even if he read the diary, there was no telling if the old man would actually keep his mouth shut, since those knights are totally loyal to the king. This old guy is a true knight, so there's no way he's breaking his word. That means he's definitely going to keep the promise he made to them. Once they left the sea, the boy just smiled and said he really wanted to live in peace and be accepted. So they headed back to the village where Kargu said his goodbyes and drove off, leaving the guy to be greeted by a girl waiting at his house. El-Fix-It-To Ilya was sitting. Final version. The guy freaked out and screamed when he saw Ilya sitting right on his doorstep looking totally pissed. And he figured that if Grandpa took a day off, Ilyas could finally chill too, but she snapped back that being left alone all day was actually super lonely, even if it was a good lesson for her. Feeling totally guilty, the guy rushed to apologize to the girl who took him in and tried to ask her out for dinner, but she cut him off right away because they didn't have a single bite to eat. He told her everything was chill because he found a tavern with awesome people, and right then, she finally realized where he'd been hiding this whole time. When he tried to tell the knight about his mission with the hag, she got totally salty and accused him of having fun with someone else instead of her. Suddenly, her eyes softened and she apologized, admitting she just really wanted someone to hang out with on her day off but got way too hyped. Ilya realized the guy had his own stuff to do and, out of nowhere, the guy smacks his own face, scaring Ilyas, and tells her to wait while he gets dressed for a walk. Ilyas is totally shocked by how fast his attitude. As she walks up to the building, she's totally shocked to realize they're at the Dog Bone, a place she knows all too well. She knew the drinks here were fire, but the food was total trash, so she felt like she was being punished. But the guy knew she was about to change her mind real quick. After promising her everything was cool, the guy turned back around. He strutted inside and waved for the confused girl to follow him. The tavern was absolutely packed with people. The waitress started to welcome them. Ilyas was the reason everything changed, so Saria ran right up to her and started hyping her up. The boy was totally shocked by Saria's crazy energy, but he just rolled. Someone from the back of the tavern shouted for the waitress, and the young guy looked at the rowdy crowd in total shock, noticing there were way more of them lately, so he asked the girl if she was blown away by how good the food tasted, but she immediately started feeling like a failure because this guy had already accomplished way more in one day than she ever could. The guy asked what Ilya thought about Syra saying hi, and the knight said she was totally blown away and actually pretty happy. The boy told her that Ilyas was a total celebrity to everyone, not just the Ragdow squad, because she'd always dreamed of being an incredible knight just like her dad. She realized that other people's opinions actually hit her pretty hard. The kid was totally on the same page as Ilyas. It's the reason why getting blamed feels like garbage but getting praised. If that didn't happen, Father Elias would have turned into a heartless, cold-blooded monster, and Elias totally snapped because she knew her dad was actually a great guy. Memories flashed through her mind of her dad's huge smile when she made him a flower crown, and that guy telling her to stop being embarrassed, grab her happiness, and turn all that. She gave him a thankful smile as she looked at his confident face, knowing that while Ilyas was easily the best knight in a fight, she was actually pretty clueless about normal life compared to other girls. She was sure she had to act all high and mighty, or she'd be no better than a total noob, but the guy stopped her and told her that wasn't true at all. Seeing her still cling to hope reminded him of his old self, and seeing how betrayed she felt made him realize that taking her to the tavern was definitely the right call. She finally had a whole squad ready to back her up. That's the whole reason he brought her here in the first place. As the party got louder, Elias jumped up from the table. The party kept raging even though the old lady was getting super grumpy about the crowd, and while the next morning was actually really bright and peaceful, Elia woke up with a massive headache and could barely. Her memories finally started coming back, flashing right before her eyes. She got a little wild last night, but it wasn't even that bad. She snuggled deep into her blankets and squeezed. Back at the castle, everything was totally normal as Kargu walked through the fancy hallways to find the right office. Lord Ragdor was chilling in his study when he welcomed the old knight inside. The knight was there to give a full report to the big boss of the Thias Kingdom's army. The old lady handed over the beat-up book, and when the lord asked what it was, the old man explained he found it using a map from the bandit leader, leaving the lord. The old guy got all awkward and tried to pick his words carefully, but the lord told him the old lady was totally fine while he stared at some crazy symbols. Then he turned to his loyal servant and asked the big question, had he actually read this book? The knight dropped to one knee and swore he brought the book straight to the lord without even peeking. And the lord totally believed him, since he already knew who was hanging out with that old hag. The lord set his book down to explain what was going on, and even though Maya told him everything while Ilias stayed quiet, the guy still asked if he really came from another world. The old man begged the lord to keep it on the low, and the lord just chuckled, promising their secret was safe. The lord didn't think Cargo had opened the book yet, but since the kid could clearly read the title, the old man told him it was the 4th sample of the Blue Demon King's research records. The lord says, Demon Kings are the absolute worst part of history, and Blue is the 4th one to ever exist, so he needs to find out where this book came from without dragging anyone else. He realized he seriously needed to find a job instead of just mooching off this girl, so he figured asking a merchant for some tips was his best move. Lost in his own head, he finally pulls up to the trading company building. It's been 3 whole days since he was last here. Yo, Ben, I just met this guy. The big boss was ready to keep pouring money into the tavern, but seeing how few workers they had really made him stop and think. These 2 guys sat down to hash out a massive trade deal. They figured that making salt the next big thing was a genius move, so they slashed the prices to get everyone hooked. With the bandits finally cleared out, tons of merchants started rolling in with awesome new gear, and as the kingdom got richer, everyone was suddenly dying to buy everything. The kid was having a blast, but he had to ask Ban about a wild rumor. He was looking for some special rock salt. Ban was actually shocked to admit that the stuff is real. He scrambled to stay on the guy's good side, bragging about how those wild lands were loaded with salt, but the merchant was totally lost when he brought up something called highlight. He explains that this is actually salt made by boiling hot spring water, and since the mountain is full of caves, they can find hidden streams inside to harvest as much as they need. Ban was super hyped about his wild new plan to mine salt from thighs. He was totally obsessed with this new info. Even though it could all blow up in his face, he was determined to go. This guy says there's a massive treasure hidden somewhere in the kingdom. He's definitely not letting a chance like this slip away. The kid realized that Ban really knows how to pick. Seeing how hyped the guy was, the kid pulled a card from his bag and slapped it on the table, revealing it was a copy of the map belonging to the boss of that crushed bandit alliance. The merchant's jaw hit the floor when he saw what the kid found, but the boy warned him they had to keep it a total secret. Since the map showed such a massive area, the bandit leader marked a bunch of hidden caves on this map that explorers made famous. So the kid looked at Ban, knowing that using these notes gave them a way better shot at finding loot than just going in blind. The man was totally blown away by how clever this kid was, especially since they were about to take everything for themselves, proving that Maya's recommendation was the real deal. But there was still one huge problem, and the man asked the kid why he wasn't worried that Ben would just go behind his back now that he had all that juicy info. The kid just smirked and told Ben he knew he'd make the right call, making Ben realize they'd actually make an awesome team. Back at the royal palace, everyone was staring at that mysterious book, and King Marito looked totally obsessed with her. Lord Ragdow was right there to spill the beans on everything that happened. Turns out, the guy who saved Lady Ratzel was the real MVP of the mission. King Marito was super hyped by how much guts this isekai kid had. The king even said he really wanted to meet this legendary guy in person. He was totally obsessed with finding out. The lord invites the kid to the award ceremony while the king makes sure they have the best drinks ready, but deep in the woods, Ban is shouting so much that he's totally killing the vibe of the research. While scouting the map, they found a perfect cave nearby that looked totally safe. So the guy started figuring out exactly how much his first experiment would cost. But the merchant wasn't backing down and insisted on tagging along just for the exercise. The kid couldn't believe how hyped this guy was getting. These guys were seriously experts at doing the most random. The kid asks if he's used to this, and the guy brags that he used to be a total menace as an adventurer before he became a merchant and finally settled down for a quiet life. He kept wondering why he always ran into such weirdos, because even though Goss and Syra were cool, they weren't nearly as unpredictable as everyone else. They finally found the right cave hidden behind some thick branches, and as they headed down, the merchant spotted something strange. Bands realized they hit a dead end way sooner than they thought, but the spot was actually perfect for hiding. The kid was already bummed that their mission was starting off as a total fail, but the merchant didn't even seem to care about the wall in front of them. Ben takes a good look at the wall and realizes it's actually covered in a massive barrier spell. He tells the guys he's definitely dealt with this kind of magic before. He pulls some gear. He slammed the rock with everything he had. Dust exploded everywhere, totally catching him off guard. Turns out that hammer was boosted to hit 10 times harder than normal. On top of that, he was The kid was totally stunned when he realized his past meant he could never use that power, while Ban suddenly spotted a brand new secret path. You could tell by the look in the merchant's eyes that he was totally in adventurer mode now. This guy was dead serious. They headed deeper in with a torch to light the way, but the cave opened up into this glowing area filled with trees and plants everywhere. It was like a secret forest was tucked away right inside the mountain. It was so bright that they didn't even why. The forest looked totally normal to the kid, but he couldn't shake this bad feeling, even though Ban was hyped that they'd finally found something epic. The kid looked over as the merchant sat by a tree with glowing flowers in its roots, and that's when it clicked. He knew exactly where they were. This place was basically the Black Demon King's death mountain, and Ban was shocked he figured it out so fast, especially when he mentioned a slime he'd run into before that proved right. Ban found some really bizarre plants that shouldn't even be in a place with this much magic, even though they expected this mountain in Thais to be just like the rest. The merchant was hyped to start a new business, and the kid was shocked that this guy could find a way to make money out of literally anything. The search started like a total mess, but out of nowhere, it actually worked. It's just a habit of his, but honestly, it's a pretty great one. He was sure they're dead. Suddenly, his vision goes totally blurry, and even though the merchant is screaming at him, he can't hear a word as his body gives up and he falls into a deep, dark sleep. After a bit, he finally starts feeling his body again as voices buzz around him. Everyone notices he's waking up, but he still can't see a thing. They start throwing questions. The second he snapped out of it, he realized he was tied up and surrounded by a bunch of pale people with pitch-black hair. The guy was stuck and couldn't move a muscle. His hands were tied up tight with heavy rope. He started to panic as it hit him. He'd definitely been kidnapped. He looked. The black-haired guy was totally stunned to see his kidnappers were actually beastmen, and they immediately shoved a weapon right against his throat. The guy was pinned down and demanded to know what was going on. So one of the demi-humans explained that since only their tribe has black hair, he must be some kind of demon. The half-humans were totally shocked he understood them, but they still didn't trust him and demanded to know who he really was. He tried to explain that he wasn't a bad guy and didn't mean any harm. He just wanted them to untie those ropes and let him go. But the tribe had no idea what he owned. He suddenly remembered what Maya told him. That spirit spell lets him translate any language and remember every single word he hears. He can understand literally everyone, but he can only speak back in the basic common. The beastmen started acting all tough, waiting to see if he even understood them, when suddenly someone shouted, "Yo, who is this black-haired guy anyway?" This was Obaba, the leader of the whole tribe. She was really old, but she wasn't even worried about the guy. To her, he just looked like a little kid. The tribesmen started filling Obaba in on everything that was going on. They realized this guy could actually understand every word they were saying, but even though he gets what they're saying, Shender finally catches on and blasts a massive wave of magic at the guy, who's totally confused about what happened to the spell, while the beast race kids are losing their minds because he's actually speaking their language. The village chief actually hooked him up with some of the tribe's secret magic, and while he hoped it would fix his side effects, it turns out that was a total bust. She grinned at the cool spell, but thought the placement was super weird, and the guy realized Maya rushed the job, which is why his muscles were totally aching. He told the beast tribe he wasn't there to cause trouble and started making a deal, knowing he couldn't waste this chance now that they could finally understand him. Back at the kingdom, Ragdor calls out to Ilias and says the guy who helped them bust those bandits definitely needs to show up for the award ceremony. Ilias knew this guy was a total beast, so she totally got why he was at the ceremony, and now she just had to go give him the heads up. After she took the job, Ragdor just stared her down in total silence, making things super awkward for Elias until she finally called out to him. He noticed she was way more chill than yesterday, so Ragdor asked what was up, and Elias totally turned bright red from embarrassment. She claimed she was totally fine, which just made Ragdor laugh even harder, and honestly, Elias was looking way better than she usually does. The man ordered Elias Ratsult to deliver the invite and make sure the guy says yes, so she headed out while Ragdor and Kargu watched her leave with big smirks. Kargo saw that Elias was totally changing for the better because of that guy, but Ragdor just wouldn't admit it. Kargo even said he wished he had a granddaughter like her, but Ragdor reminded him that he's her dad, not her grandpa. Ban's sprinting through the forest, totally out of breath, but after seeing a mark on his map, he decides to double back and save the guy, while over at the Beast Tribe, the wolf-eared kids are freaking out because the Demon King is finally gone. Everyone was totally blown away that the Demon King was dead, and seeing their faces, he realized he definitely shouldn't mention that a tiny slime was the one who actually took him out. So, these black wolves actually moved to this forest ages ago just to hide from the Black Demon King. They've been keeping a super low profile and living quietly this whole time. They even totally, The Beast Man was desperate to find his buddy Ban, but the guy had zero clues, though he's sure Ban will come back for backup since he'd never just leave a friend hang. It's not like the tribe was about to get raided or anything. They'd been living a totally chill life without any fighting at all. If they can just trust their old friend who came, Obaba knew that if they didn't free him, he totally would have let his friend loose on them. He definitely wouldn't have trusted them after that. Then, the guy asked, Bobobo wanted this guy to help her tribe finally talk to the people outside the woods. The dude was completely blown away by her request. She realized they should have left their old life in the village. This guy could speak both their language and the outside worlds, which was a huge win for the tribe. People in Tessaisha were definitely going to be interested in them. Now, a few of the tribe members were actually pretty worried about her choice. Obama was totally sold on the dude. He didn't seem like a liar at all, so they figured he was safe to trust. Turns out, our guy had been knocked out cold for a solid hour. The tribal kid started apologizing like crazy, but he told him it was totally fine. All he wanted in return was a quick tour. Even though the forest was way up in the mountains, they were always out hunting, and whenever they spotted a massive group of animals, the whole tribe would just charge in and take down the entire herd. The villagers watched the guys train, and man, they were lightning fast and totally geared up. Our main guy looked at the warriors in total awe. They were way stronger than any regular bandits. Suddenly, he hears a strange noise echoing from far away. He walks forward a bit and spots a small group of kids hanging out. He's curious about what they're doing, so the Beast Man warns him that staying there will get him cursed, since that's the home of a kid nobody ever wanted. Suddenly, this white-haired beast girl pops up right in front of them, looking all messy and innocent while the guy just stares at her in total shock. These animal race kids were hanging around the girl's house, laughing their heads off. Our guy finally woke up and noticed the noise. He saw them picking on a girl that everyone called cursed. He couldn't understand why they'd treat a white-haired girl like this or why she was dumped in this gross, lonely spot so far from the village. The guy actually smiles while telling her she's a mistake just because of how she looks. Then he kicks the kids out of the house because he thinks they're cursed, while this moment totally shook him because he knew exactly how she felt, since it was just like what he went through back in Japan. He tried to chill out since he knew these people were totally clueless, and now he had to get the real story from Obaba about why everyone was picking on the white-haired girl. The whole palace was freaking out. Everyone just found out the half-human snatched the black-haired guy. Kargo ordered everyone to go find him right now, but he was determined to keep Rag. It was Ilias's day off, so Kargu just hoped his friend was doing okay. But meanwhile, over in the demi-human village, the guy walked into a house where an animal. While checking out the half-human village, he notices something strange and really wants to know why this one girl is being called an unwanted child. The woman pointed at the girl and called her cursed, claiming that white hair was a sign of doom and that the Black Wolf tribe should never have kids who look like that. Her mom died giving birth and her dad never made it home because of a giant monster. So when the villagers dumped her in the woods, the plants literally started dying all around her. She was taking lives, so the tribe kicked her out for being a total outsider and to make sure her curse didn't hit them too. This girl was forced to live outside the village because she was supposedly bad luck, but our main guy wasn't having any of it. The villagers were basically using her as a human shield. Obaba warned him it was way too late to be safe outside the village, but the guy just gloomily said he'd be fine as long as he didn't try to escape, while The lady didn't care one bit about what he was doing. Eventually, he ended up right in front of her busted-up shack. Her place was literally just some stapled wood. The white-haired girl took one look at him, freaked out, and immediately dove for cover. Even though the guy from another world tried to calm her down, she just kept staring at him. She curled up into a ball to hide because she was totally terrified. She started making weird noises that didn't make any sense. Looking at her, the guy finally realized she didn't make any sense. He just stood there staring at the poor girl in a total daze now that his translation spell was finally working. He really needed to figure out what these black wolf demi-humans were actually saying. The guy looked totally crushed when he realized she didn't even know the language, so he had no clue what she was trying to say. This blonde girl was shaking and crying her eyes out. Those heavy iron chains had totally wrecked her leg. She'd been living in total terror all by herself since the day she was born. The black-haired guy stares down at the girl shivering in her gross, broken-down shack, but she can't even hide because the chains on her legs have her totally trapped and terrified. The traveler couldn't wrap his head around why she was treated so badly, and the white-haired girl just looked at him with tears in her eyes. Seeing how beat up she looked and hearing her sad story, the guy actually started tearing up. It was so brutal he could barely even look at her. So he rushes over and pulls her. The wanderer finally broke down, crying about how lonely and terrified she was after everything she'd suffered. And she knew the people who forced her into this life had no right to do that to her. He's screaming his lungs out about how she feels, and even though she wanted to stand up to her tribe, she had zero backup. So she just stared at him looking totally confused by what he was saying. He knew it was totally weird for a kid to never cry, but while this world had already drained the white-haired girl of all her tears, our hero was struggling just to keep himself from breaking down. He stared her down with total confidence while she just stood there looking completely lost. She honestly had no idea what he was even talking about. The whole world had basically treated her like an outcast. He's gonna do whatever it takes to make sure she stays safe. He's putting everything on the line, and if his plan works, he can finally just chill and live a... The black-haired dude was totally losing it and crying his eyes out. He swore that she'd never have to feel the pain of being bullied ever again. The white-haired girl just stared at Rie. After a while, the sobbing finally stops, and he lets her go, apologizing for the breakdown. But she just shakes her head to show it's all good as he turns his attention to the beast girl. He was super embarrassed when he realized she actually understood him, staring at her in total shock since she didn't have a clue what he was saying just a minute ago. He gives her a quick head pat, but then he notices her hair is actually glowing and he's totally freaking out. He caught her eye right away. He asked her if she wanted to ditch her village for good. She just stared back at him with a blank look, not really getting what he meant. He stood. Out of nowhere, someone reaches out and grabs him. This mysterious guy tells him he needs to stay calm. Right away, he realizes he knows that voice. It's his old buddy, Ban. So the man finally stripped off the clothes hiding his face, and the other guy let out a massive sigh of relief because he was just so happy to see that Ben was doing fine. Ban's announced that backup was already rushing to the village. The guy tried to stay out of sight, but he couldn't stop himself from sobbing. He was totally terrified when he realized Ban had heard. It actually made him feel pretty bummed out for a second. Ban just kept on talking. The Karagu U squad was waiting right at the forest's edge, but they definitely should. That totally killed his vibe and made him feel super down for a second. But the Karagoryu Jesta squad was already lurking right at the edge of the forest. They definitely should. As soon as this strange guy showed up, the white-haired girl got totally spooked and scrambled back into her shack, shivering like crazy while staring at them in pure terror. He tried to calm her down, but Ban suddenly asked about the villagers. And since the guy was totally wrong about the bandits, he started spilling the real story. Once the truth finally clicked, Ban started bawling his eyes out, and when the guy asked for one last favor, he sprinted off to get it done. The guy watched the man walk away. He knew this might mess up his peaceful life, but he decided right then and there that he was going to save this girl himself. Just then, the white one so this time he tossed his dream of a quiet life aside and told the girl he was definitely going to save her. He just wanted her to be free and pick her own path without any regrets, so he knew he had to keep his cool to make it happen. Back at the kingdom, Ilias was having zero luck finding her guy. She checked every single spot he usually hangs out at, but he was nowhere to be found. Now, she was feeling totally crushed. She was super frustrated that her mission was going to fail. Suddenly, a messenger from the band walked right up to her. He was totally exhausted from searching for Lady Ilias for so long. She realized the demi-humans snatched the guy up, leaving the girl totally shocked when she found out, while he was already at the Black Wolf village trying to add a new rule to their deal. The village thought the negotiator was trying to flip the deal, but that wasn't it. They're still getting their food, and if they agree to some extra rules, they'll get a huge bonus too. If they agree to a fair deal, everything's settled. But Baba knew if they said no, they'd just raid the village. But that's not how it went down at all. If they don't agree to the same terms, they aren't getting the goods. The whole deal hinges on this one moment. He wanted to let an unwanted kid leave the village, and while everyone was totally shocked, Obama calmed them down since the guy never asked for favors and they were actually happy to help him out. That really ticked him off because he thought her leaving was for the best and they were totally cool, but then a beast man suddenly crashes into the room screaming for Obama. One of the animal folk rushed over to tell the village leaders that armed strangers were at the front gate. The woman looked totally shocked, and in no time the whole group was standing at Hoed. The traveler told everyone to chill because the knights were only after him. They really should have just kept talking things through. Then he found out who the strongest fighter in the village was. The guy was totally stunned that he was sent to take her out, but since nobody tried to stop him, he just decided to roll with the mistake. The whole village thinks he's torn between feeling sorry for the white-haired girl and hating her guts, so he challenges her to a duel to finally settle the score. The guy just smirked and didn't even try to set her straight. The village chief was totally against the deal. And honestly, nobody wanted to deal with the girl's creepy. The Wanderer announced that his knights were finally getting serious, and Kargu and Ragdor stepped onto the field, staring each other down with their weapons ready for action. The fight kicks off and their weapons clash so hard the sound rings through the village, sending massive gusts of wind across the field that force everyone to duck for cover. Kargu goes for the kill, but Ragdor slams his hammer into the ground, stopping him cold with a massive crack. The knights keep trading blows without slowing down. Every hit sends. Then the guy dropped the news that the knights weren't coming to help. So barely anyone actually showed up to fight. He told the villagers not to talk trash about the small squad they were stuck. They didn't have any other choice, so the talk kept going. Because he was clearly way stronger, nobody tried to start any trouble. Then the guy turned his gaze toward the girl with the white bow. The blonde girl was looking super nervous standing by the tribesmen. Then this guy suddenly walks up and whispers something that makes her totally freak out. The girl was starting to freak out, but the guy just calmly walked the other way. Kargu asked about their last battle, and the Wanderer just gave him a smirk instead of an. He really enjoyed the fight and thought it was an awesome show, and thanks to the old man, they were about to see something crazy. So even though Kargu was stressing, the guy told him to chill because he totally had everything under control. The village chief agrees and brings out their strongest warrior to take on the exile, all by himself. A girl thinks he's hunting a curse that drains his life force, but he just ignores her and gets ready to fight right away. The chief went dead silent and told everyone to get ready for a showdown. The white-haired girl looked at the guy with tears in her eyes, gripping her sword even though she was totally terrified. The fight kicks off as a guy from the half-human village screams and charges straight at the white-haired exile. He gets ready to strike, but his move is cut short before he can even Everyone's jaws hit the floor, and right then, the black-haired guy screams at the blonde girl to strike while she has the chance. So she shakes off her fear and totally locks in. The village outcast squared up to fight, screaming through her tears as she balled up her fist to strike. Then the white-haired girl just decks him, and the hit is so powerful that the village's strongest warrior flies back and smashes right into a house. Everyone was totally floored when the exile absolutely wrecked their strongest warrior. And then he told them his real plan was just to make sure everyone heard the same thing. The girl they all hate isn't actually cursed. Her white hair and unique eyes are just a rare condition called albinism that only 1 in 10,000 kids get. And her parents dying was just a total freak accident that could have happened to anyone. Terrified of the disaster, the locals cooked up a fake curse about an unwanted kid, and their own stupidity led them to do something horrible that they'd have to live with forever. Even if he said it out loud, some people still wouldn't buy it. But after that crazy duel, he showed everyone exactly what she's worth. Now the Wanderer and the girl. He kept talking, describing a place with see-through trees that glow from soaking up magic, and then he pointed right at her own shining hair. Right then, knowing the language actually saved the day, as the girl's magic blasted straight in and messed up the guy's spell, proving she's got a crazy amount of power hidden inside. This super gloomy dude told everyone that the girl has insane talent. Just like the legendary hero who took down the Demon King. This kid wasn't unwanted at all. He was actually born to be their savior. The Black Wolf tribe was living in total fear of the Demon King until heaven sent this child down to them. Some of them actually fell to their knees as the guilt of what they did to her finally hit them. But the guy just coolly told her she was coming with him because of the deal, and they started walking out of town. This dude totally blew the knights away with his performance, giving them literal chills, but he was secretly terrified the villagers would start a riot. Everything worked out perfectly thanks to Ban. The dude realized he was totally outclassed by Ilias because she's just way too powerful. This whole fight only ended well because Ban showed him exactly how to. She finally crushed her fear of the village and took charge with her own hands, and this moment is definitely going to be the foundation for everything she does next. This was actually for the village's own good because those fake myths and lies kept them trapped in the woods, but now they're finally going to see how wrong they were and totally regret it. He was getting pretty annoyed that they were blaming him for not getting everyone on board. But hey, he was still just a rookie. Out of nowhere, that old hag started walking toward them. Kargu was crying his eyes out while begging the guy to fix the drama with the girl. Their performance together was so insane that it totally blew everyone away. But because of that, the girl was totally hyped up earlier, and her magic power was on a whole different level. 10,000 villagers were absolutely terrified of her. Right before the fight started, the guy whispered that the girl is totally freaking out, and it gets even crazier when Kargu points his weapon right at the guy's neck, leaving the wolf absolutely terrified. Since the villagers were totally freaked out, she started clinging to this guy for dear life. This girl was honestly such an incredible kid, but the guy didn't even bother to clear up the confusion. She was still so innocent even though things had changed, and he felt way too guilty to actually tell her the truth. The Wanderer knew that once they got back home, he was going to take real good care of her. He'd make sure she got a warm bath and a solid meal. Plus, out of nowhere, something totally caught his eye. He just stood there, staring into the distance with a look of pure terror. It turns out that creepy girl Ilias was actually standing. They were totally stuck until the guy remembered Ilias was off today, but since finding anyone else was taking way too long, Ban had no choice but to call him up. Once the knights realized the guy was safe, they just chilled in a cave while Ilias spent the whole night searching the woods. And when the girl found out, she started laughing like a total maniac, scaring the absolute life out of everyone. The old lady literally shoved the guy toward the girl. He was totally stunned that his grandpa would do something like that. Eventually, he cooled off and told Elias he was sorry. After that, he pulled her into a massive hug. He thanked her for searching so hard, knowing she was completely worn out. Ilias tried to act tough and say she wasn't tired at all. The Wanderer took the fall for everything. He was actually pretty happy she was so worried about him. Ilias turned bright red from embarrassment. She was just super relieved he was okay. The knights were just stoked that everything was finally settled. If Elias had shown up earlier, they could have wrapped this case up way faster. But Ban wasn't even thinking about that. Elias, actually showed up here. Everything would just turn into a total mess. Ilias heard what he said and his face immediately dropped into a huge scowl. The guy felt super awkward and he'd finally managed to get Ilias to chill out. But then they suddenly started bringing it up. He realized he was going to have to tank the girl's crazy power. He tried to lie his way out, but she wasn't buying it anymore. She grabbed him by the waist so hard he winced in pain. The white-haired girl just watched them with tears. Ilias knocked the guy out cold with just one punch. He was honestly just a total weakling from another world. Once the whole situation was explained, Ilias finally understood what was going on. Suddenly, a super cute girl shows up right in front of him. He's shocked by how much more gorgeous she's become, but she's totally terrified because of what She tackled the guy while sobbing, and he totally wiped out under her weight. Elias was having a nightmare of a time because she refused to listen, especially since she used to be the guy's bully. First off, the guy just wanted to get the girl over to Maya. Then Ilias tells him he's got to be at this big award ceremony for catching those robbers. But she was totally ticked off and demanded to know why he rejected her, but she was squeezing his shoulder so hard it actually hurt, until Ilias finally snapped out of it and let him go. He told her that stuff only matters to actual knights. He just wanted to stay under the radar. She should have realized that acting like weirdos was making everyone stare at them. She didn't even sweat it since her team was right there for her, and Ilias was sure they'd always have each other's backs. He's totally down with the plan, knowing Kargu, Ban, and Elias have his back, but he tells the girl to chill with her powers for a bit since he stayed low to avoid drawing heat because he was a total coward, and Elia was honestly shocked by how much of a chicken he was being. This dude just barely made it out alive after getting jumped by a bear and a slime. He knew Ilias had his back, but he still wasn't ready to go all in on trusting him. The guy smiles and says Ilias is the only one he trusts right now, but then he totally shuts her down and refuses to join. Ilias explains that Ragdor ordered her to do this. He almost said no, but he couldn't let Ilias's reputation take a hit. She'd done so much for him that he really wanted to show his thanks. But then, he calls. Maya pulled off the spell on the girl. Then Ilias introduced herself and asked if she could understand her. The girl totally understood everything, but the guy was still stressing that Maya might. Ilias finally remembered her name, but now she was dying to know who her hero was, and he realized he could basically pick any name he wanted her to call him. He liked the name, but told her she could drop the formal suffixes, and when Maya suddenly brought up the darling nickname, he just totally ignored her. To help her learn to stand on her own 2 feet, he was ready to give her all the support she needed. He was taking full responsibility for her from now on. He even decided she weighed her options for a second, but finally decided to just call him Master, which totally boosted his ego. Right after that, he asked Maya to train the girl on how to keep her magic hidden. So that's exactly why Cyrus showed up at the church. The girl there was totally hyped to see such a cute girl. She immediately pulled her into a big hug. Since she was finally free, the guy asks Cyrus to hook the girl up with some custom clothes since this city doesn't sell anything for demi-humans, all while she starts training her heart out right there in the field. Cyrus was totally down for the guy's plan. She headed straight to the workshop, super hyped to get started. Now, they just had to teach this girl how to actually talk. Maya used a translation spell so the girl could finally understand what everyone was saying. But she still had a massive mountain of work ahead of her. If she didn't step it up, he claimed he could explain the laws of life, but the guy was actually a total genius at understanding how the world works. Because of that, he asked Maya to step in and help them out. Cyrus comes sprinting in out of nowhere. The girl quickly crafts a whole new outfit for her friend. He's blown away by her insane speed, but the next second he's getting kicked. She was rocking a super chill outfit with an off-the-shoulder top, tiny shorts, and comfy boots. And while everyone loved the look, Cyrus thought black clothes would pop way more against her white. The guy loved his new look, and Sayara was super hyped when Elias gave her a compliment. Her designs were totally trendy, but Elias still felt like she didn't really fit into this world. Maya backed him up, so the guy told Sarah her next mission was to make an outfit for Ilias, and after saying he was hyped to see her work, he paid her so much money that she actually felt awkward taking. This guy wasn't just paying for the materials, he was paying for her crazy skills. Syra was totally stressed because she didn't know the first thing about selling, but the dude was. She was super happy to hear them say that. The guy was seriously impressed by how talented Cyrus was. In only a few hours, she didn't just finish the design, she even picked out. They finally headed out of the church. Before long, they came across a super popular tavern. The girl caught a whiff of something delicious and rushed inside, totally hyped. The place was packed with people. Ilias noticed the tavern was getting way more crowded. The guy totally agreed with her. He was already plotting his next big move. He wanted to figure out how to make a sweet dessert. A minute later, a plate of food is set right in front of her, and the guy tells her to just copy everything he does while she stares at him like she's trying to memorize his. She finally got the hang of it and grabbed a spoon. Her hand was shaking like crazy since she wasn't used to it. She still managed to get a taste of the meal. She absolutely loved it. They didn't even leave the tavern until the sun was finally setting. The guy actually gave Ilias props for staying totally chill and not causing a scene. But for some reason, he wanted to make sure even a kid who can't read yet could survive on their own. Then he shouted over to Ilias. There was one specific thing he'd been about the girl's name. The village only called her the Cursed Child. And even though Ilias tried to name her after the words for black and white in his own, Ilias recognized the name Wolf from his native tongue. And even though it sounded totally tough and strong, it also had this soft, light feel that he really vibed with. He told her that her new name was going to be Ufi from now on. She kept repeating the name to herself, curious about how it sounded. She was totally happy to be around him. He told Ulfa that from now on, this house was her home too. Ulfa looked at him like he was a total hero. She got her energy up and sprinted straight for the front. Meanwhile, the king found out there's a secret tribe of demi-humans living in Thieves that nobody even knew about. So much has gone down since the guys first arrived in this world. Mary. The king stared out the window, joking that his heart was racing just thinking about meeting a pretty noble girl, while Ragudo knew he was just playing around as our guy headed up the stairs. Ulface was leveling up at a crazy speed, and while he wanted to handle everything himself, he wasn't sure where to draw the line, which definitely annoyed Ilias since he still didn't. She was super sensitive to everyone's opinions and kept all that stress bottled up, while the guy realized Ilias had a crazy unique power and decided to avoid a direct fight. But he just shook those thoughts out of his head. That whole oath drama meant things with their enemies were about to get way more complicated. And honestly, he wasn't feeling that vibe at all. Since he had a big award ceremony to get to, he told John to hook him up with some fresh clothes. After getting dressed, he finally stepped out to face the crowd. John thought, he looked just like some fancy old-school noble. He stepped outside and saw a carriage rolling up. It was Kargu arriving to meet them. He was geared up in his usual armor, but man, these things were definitely not normal. Our guy totally thought he'd get some special armor just for the big ceremony. But nope, Haig actually had to bust his back polishing this specific set. By helping out with the demi-human negotiations, he scored a percentage of all their future trade profits. And as they arrived at the palace, he was finally off the unemployment list. The big ceremony is just about to start. Suddenly, our main guy hears some nasty rumors floating around about this girl. It turns out the snobby nobles absolutely hate the king's regular people. Our guy finally sees King Thee for the first time, and he looks way younger than you'd expect for a king. But then he suddenly feels the man's eyes locking right onto him. The award ceremony kicks off and they start calling out the night squads one by one. Our MC is stuck in his head because the king keeps staring at him, but he figures he's probably just overgeeked. The king thanked her for being a total boss and wiping out those bandits. Everyone cheered as the ceremony wrapped up and the massive feast finally started. The whole room was packed with tables covered in. She's already finished up and tells him Ragudo wants to meet, just as he spots Ragudo hanging out with the king. The guy spotted him and introduced himself. He said his name was Salvat Ragudo. He thanked me for looking after a whole squad, but the other guy totally denied it. Then, out of nowhere, Marito was a king who realized that even though Ilias was a brave warrior, she was still a total rookie, so he helped her become someone who actually mattered. The king was dying to see how this guy would react to what he just said. Just like the report said, this mysterious dude had pitch-black hair and eyes. Marito had already heard the fight. The king already told his guards to back off so they wouldn't get in his way. All he wanted was to find out who this guy was and what he was planning to do next, but Marito thought the guy totally misunderstood his handshake as a request for some snacks, but the dude just handed him some fruit that was super hard to peel. After finishing his snack, the king turned. He couldn't believe this black-haired dude just ignored him and walked off. The king just stood there, totally stunned for a second, but he wasn't letting him get away that easily, so the guy just watched the king run away with a massive smirk on his face. Marto was totally blown away by this. He just stood there staring at the wanderer with his jaw on the floor. The king actually started cracking up. He said sorry for being so nosy. Right then, Ilias and Ragudo came charging into the room. The guy told the girl her acting was straight. The king started cracking up even more. He was really starting to like this guy, so he ended up borrowing him from Ilias. Pretty soon, they were both hanging out in the king's private. The king thanked him, but since the knights were so obsessed with honor, the bandits totally used that to play them. Our guy was shocked by how chill the king was being, but Ragudo, the king knew that without this guy's genius plan, the knights never would have gotten the bandits to talk. And thanks to that, Rachel was able to totally wreck the bandit leader. He told the king he should have actually praised Ilias for being brave enough to follow her dad's dark path and face the music. And right after that, she totally accepted the guy thanks the king for treating the Black Wolf tribe like equals. Even though the king is so powerful, he could have just crushed them and forced them to obey. The king just burst out laughing when he heard what the guy said. He grinned and told him it wasn't even worth talking about such dangerous stuff. After all, he didn't. The king's move totally threw the guy off and left him feeling super awkward. He was acting like someone who was about to have a total meltdown from all the stress. The king actually loved. Then the knight pulled a beat-up notebook from his chest armor labeled Sample 4, Research on the Blue Demon Lord. The man brought up the one thing the guy really didn't want to talk about, but it was way too important to ignore. The king realized the book was actually written in the language from the Bien. This whole thing was basically a trap that would land him in some serious danger. Besides, if Grandpa Kargu had actually read it, he would have become an accomplice right then and there. If this country had insane rules like Mijim, they'd be hunting this guy down everywhere just to take him out. He hated the sound of that. Honestly, even if he hadn't, Meiji's land got absolutely wrecked by the Demon Lord more than anywhere else. Huge parts of the country are still just total dead zones. So yeah, the locals get really touchy if you. It turns out the bandit leader's Dokla was actually a destroyer from Magus, and the black-haired guy was totally blown away by the news. Honestly, the whole thing sounded super sketchy. If this book actually has that research, the entire world is in big trouble. Our guy wanted nothing to do with it. That's exactly. The king promised he'd be totally safe. They couldn't afford to lose him because he was way too valuable. This guy was dying to find out what kind of secrets were hidden inside. Maya's also carrying the heaviest load right now. And once they finish this mission, they're finally heading back to headquarters to dive into their research. They probably knew about the book all along, and while the guy was totally losing his mind, he really shouldn't have been that shocked since Maya wasn't exactly a master of secrets. Even if he trusts her, he definitely can't trust the shady people backing Maya and Yuger. Meiji kept totally quiet about the book and didn't say a word. The king was low. Ilias's mom and Maya were actually total besties. If this guy spills the beans, she's definitely going to go talk to Maya about it. That's exactly why Once he cooled off, he asked the king what he was really after. The king wanted him to translate this mysterious book into their world's language. Having a handwritten copy would be way too dangerous. The king wants him to keep coming back to the castle to translate the book, and he's even giving him a cover story as a consultant so no one gets suspicious. This guy is actually landing a huge job as a royal minister. He's going to spill all the secrets of his world directly to the king. But to everyone else in the palace, the traveler wasn't exactly vibing with his new title, but he figured his world's info might be useful, even though he was just a regular guy with no big secrets. And honestly, our guy agreed to the king's plan, but he had one catch and needed the king to fix a few things first. Once he explained it, the king thought it over and agreed. They shook hands to make things official, and Ragdor noticed the king was actually having a total blast hanging out with the guy. He was way more interesting than the guy expected, and then he brought up the way he was talking to him. Ragdor almost burst out laughing thinking about how chill his king sounded. After seeing that, the king decided they'd only ever meet in secret. It was the only time he could actually chill out and be himself. He realized he didn't just want this. The royal guy finished his drink, dying to get this man on his team, while Ilias headed home and walked into her house acting totally weird. She looked up and saw the most incredible view ever. Right then, a guy and a girl walked over to her carrying a ton of food. They gave Ilias a huge thanks for doing. That talk with the king was a total shock, but today was all about Ilias, and the girl was completely stunned by the massive feast covering the entire table. People are always going to hate on Ilias, and that's probably never going to change. That's exactly why this guy wanted to step up and congratulate her for everyone there. Then, meanwhile, in a pitch-black room, the only light came from a creepy glow of dark energy. The demon boss asked his minion if they'd finally tracked down that recording. That meant someone had already swiped them. So demon goons were guarding the borders of Thais to stop the book from leaving, while spies were sent out to hunt her down. They're bound to find those records eventually, but they've got to move fast because if that book gets out, they're totally cooked. If they find out a demon is involved, this whole partnership is totally over. The guy would just be dead weight, and the demon would stop helping him entirely. The man with the eye mole thanked the bee. He grabbed some stones to build a fire and started cooking up his meal. Before he knew it, the food was ready to go. He sat there thinking about how crazy fast time was flying. It was Ulfi. She gave him a super happy greeting. But the truth is, the whole thing was a total lie. This guy had only been in this world for 2 weeks. Next, he looked over at the white-haired girl and realized something pretty fast. She didn't even need magic to talk anymore, and even though she only knew the basics, she was already speaking there. The girl was actually picking up some Japanese, even learning to say itadakimasu before every meal. But our guy was still totally relying on Maya for his magic because he just couldn't. Ulfi greets Ilya expecting her to be super hyped for the morning, but she's actually totally exhausted because she's still wearing her heavy armor even inside the house. This girl really needed to care more about how she looked to everyone else. At the very least, she should have smiled back when people said hi. Instead, she just walked around with a huge s. The crew finally headed out, and Ulfa was already ignoring all the shady looks from the crowd. If she just believed in herself a bit more, she'd totally be the most popular beast. The government finally made it official and recognized the demi-humans in TSA territory. And lately, our guy has been seeing members of the Black Wolf tribe hanging around the city. The crew really needed to get inside the palace, so our guy scored a special pass from Raguto that lets them skip all the boring security and meet him or Marito face to face. They stepped into King Marito's office, and he gave them a quick greeting while staying busy with a mountain of paperwork. They needed a spot to sit, so while Marito rushes through his paperwork, he sets things up so they don't get bored waiting around. This guy was feeling like a total happy-go-lucky clown. Suddenly, Ulfi heard the sound of weapons clashing in the distance. It was finally time to get to work. This guy felt like a total clown having the time of his life. Suddenly, Alfie caught the sound of swords clashing from way off in the distance. It was finally time to get some training. Right at that moment, the king finally finished signing all those papers. He really wanted to let students choose their own classes for once. So, he handpicked a few special candidates to get things started. One line out. Strictly. Line 1. The king tried to level up the schools, but nobody was really on board. Line 2. That's because everyone preferred having... The king was totally vibing with the ideas from our hero's world. He couldn't even imagine a world with over 7 billion people in it. Right now, our guy was yes. He explained exactly how the government worked and how the people were living. After that, they started digging into the real reasons behind it all. They eventually decided to try out those same rules in the land of, it's a choice between kings ruling by blood or everyone getting a vote. The big struggle is figuring out which system actually works best for the country. Now, the king wants to see their... He shows the drawing to the king, and while this tool would be a total game changer if they could build it with magic, the big problem is that nobody actually knows how the heck it works. The king knew he needed to find a pro wizard he could actually trust. Right then, the loud sound of clashing weapons totally caught his attention. Marito just laughed and decided it was time for a... They all rushed to the window to check out the practice. Ofe was going head-to-head with Ragdor. She was literally bouncing off that massive hammer like it was a toy. She fought back with every weapon she had, and even though she couldn't land a single hit on Raguto's squad, the king was freaked out by how fast she was leveling up. But honestly, her insane skills and experience totally carried the day. Then, the guy shifted his focus straight onto Ilias. And man, she was playing on a whole different level. This girl wasn't just a regular gorilla, she was a full-on magical metal beast. Ilias definitely noticed them staring. She shot the guy a totally miserable look. The king invited the guy. Next, he tried to offer him Raguto. The king thought he'd be a great buddy since he's good at everything, but the guy totally shut him down. That's when a messenger from the Ugra church headquarters is on their way to inspect all the local branches. They're planning to check out every single church in every village. Marito chose Karga and I. The king wanted him to use this chance to check out the local villages. He was honestly surprised that the traveler knew exactly how different their worlds were, and the best move was to just send... He could finally stop stressing because the king already announced that a new recruit was coming for training, and he was just hyped. They didn't treat him like some total joke of a court jester. They headed out of the palace as night fell, and after a quick shower, our guy hit the gym where he found Ilias busy messing with his weapons. The girl was there too, scrubbing her blade. He was just relieved that Ulfe was way too busy to bother him. Then Ilias suddenly asked him to join their training session. Marito told him the exact same thing too. Our guy definitely. But get this, the king actually told him to just use his first name. He still has to act professional when other people are watching though. Then the guy stops talking and just stares right at the sheet. Since he's stuck going to the castle every day, moving closer seemed like the smartest move. Hearing this, the girl's face totally dropped. She tried to hide how sad she was. And the second reason was that he was still just trying to figure out how this whole new world worked. Refining for teenager telling a story. Then, he was still super nervous about living in this new place, and when the girl just stared at him like he was crazy, he caught an attitude as the whole room went dead silent. He dipped because things got super awkward, but Ilias was dying to know what he actually meant. But he stopped her right there. He told her she could take his words however she wanted. He shut himself away and locked the door to his room. He used Alpha as an excuse to say no, but he felt pretty bad about it. Thinking about all those deep feelings totally fret. He put on a tough act for everyone, but he was really just a kid who relied way too much on others. He should have been fine living a normal life on his own here. He totally tricked himself into believing this was actually going to be a good time. It was only a matter of time before Ilias became a massive part of his life. She hooked him up with advice. This new world definitely wasn't as comfy as his old one. But hey, it actually had some pretty cool upsides. Even the bandits here were super honest about being bad guys. After, one of the robbers actually thanked him, saying he was finally at peace with getting wrecked. And honestly, hanging out with such pure-hearted people who live so truthfully was just super convenient for him. Picking this quiet life meant he could finally ditch all those bad vibes and just chill, like he was out in the countryside. He was looking for a way back home, but since he might be stuck here forever, all he really wanted was to just live a chill and quiet life. The next morning, they finally arrived at the church. Ulfa was all smiles and told everyone she was ready to roll. Maya couldn't believe her eyes when she saw this guy was, Ufei is sticking by his side for this journey too. Right then, he asks about the church's messenger. Just as he says that, a voice calls out that the messenger has. The guy asks for her name, and out of nowhere, she grabs his hand and blushes hard as she tells him her name is Lacquer. Lucra was digging this guy's unique look with his black hair and dark eyes, but she noticed he barely had any magic, so when she asked where he was from, he just told this was the first place on the continent he ever called home. He was born with almost zero magic power. Since he was so weak, he couldn't even handle basic physical labor. She spotted a spirit following the guy thanks to Maya's possession technique, but he quickly switched the topic to the Black Wolf tribe. The moment Black Rose saw Ulfi, she realized she was one of them. And the guy explained that even though Ulfi speaks their language perfectly, he uses that special technique to talk to the rest of Daoshukobia. Then he told her his friend was the one who actually found the village and he was just helping out, which totally blew her mind. She blushed when she saw how hard this young guy was working. The traveler didn't want to be in her debt, so he gave Lacrya a compliment right back. He flashed a face. Lacrog just laughed at what he said. Even though he was grinning, he could totally feel the other girls giving him major death glares. Then Ilias jumped in and cut them off. Once Lacroix and Elias cleared out, Maya walked right up to him. She was actually super impressed by how smart he was playing it. He knew he had to keep his past a total secret for now. The girl could tell he wasn't faking it. He was actually being totally honest with her. Just like Maya, Lacra is a major spiritual leader for the Yugura religion. These guys have way better magic senses than anyone else, and since they can see your power flicker, they'll know the second you're lying. They had a huge edge since they could see everyone's deepest secrets, and the moody guy was already trying to figure out their trick. He definitely made himself right at home in this world, and by using Maya's secret skill, he can even talk to the Black Wolf tribe, using a clever word loop to keep everyone. Maya realized this guy already had his answers ready to go because he knew she'd ask. And even though he's hiding secrets, he's trying to act totally natural so she doesn't get suspicious. He tried to change the subject by saying Lacra was actually super pretty, but Maya totally hated that, and soon enough they were both riding in the carriage. They were putting some serious distance between them and the capital of Thais, with Wolfie totally vibing on the roof of the wagon while Cargo handled the drive. Back in the cart, the group is busy checking the map, but the wind gets so wild that Ulfi has to grab onto the wagon's cover just to keep from being blown away. They finally hit the spot they were looking for. The whole place was super quiet and chill, and Lacra and Cargu were already busy chatting with the village chief. Looking around, he saw people using cranes to get water, proving they actually had a working system. But it really just depended on where you were standing. It was a massive struggle just to get enough. He spots a watchtower near the village and gets curious, but when Ilias explains it's for fighting off monsters, the guy is absolutely stunned. The black-haired guy got pretty nervous hearing about monsters, because it turns out this world has both demons and monsters lurking around. The dude had absolutely no clue what they were, so Ilias explains that these monsters actually crossed over from a whole different dimension. Back in the day, literal demon kings were the ones calling the shots. The entrance was actually super close to the mountain where the Black Demon King's destroyer lived. Hearing that, our guy finally realized that was just a fancy nickname for that gross slug, Cargu. After hearing that guy's story, Cargo felt like the luckiest dude alive. That old hag's legend finally made him realize why a wyvern was suddenly showing up here. They finally hopped back into the carriage and hit the road. Lacroix was absolutely hyped because the whole inspection had gone perfectly. Meanwhile, the girl was already dreaming about the big award she'd. The Yuga religion is actually named after the legendary hero who saved the entire world. Back then, terrifying demons born from dark magic were basically holding the whole world hostage. But then the hero teamed up. This holy ground is tucked away in Meges, a kingdom where the Pope is the one actually pulling all the strings. The king of Magist strikes a deal with him and then breaks the news to his people, since that was his whole job. Midas had zero chill for anyone breaking the taboos, and it turns out the Ugurians were the ones pulling the strings behind it all. That devil puppet and the forbidden book are both linked. He knew right then that things were getting way too dangerous, and after a while they ended up in a totally different village where Ulfi started scanning the whole place like a hawk. She got all hyped up telling her master that the cows here were way smaller than the last village, and he just started cracking jokes about them. They scoped out the villages and kept moving, but night fell fast and it got way too dark to stay on the road. The crew stopped at a village and decided to crash in the church for the night, while the village chief managed to lure the old hag to his place, proving that the gray-haired guy is... The nuns showed everyone to their rooms so they could finally rest. Our guy headed into his room to settle in for the night. But first, he had to look through a stack of papers. This dude was totally buried in a mountain of paperwork. He was laser-focused on filling out every single page. Out of nowhere, there's a loud knock at his door. Without even asking who, it turns out it was actually Lakra. She apologized for dropping by so late, explaining that she couldn't sleep and went for a walk, which is when she saw his light was still on. The guy's jaw hit the floor when he saw her, because even though she wasn't showing much skin, her outfit hugged her curves perfectly, and that deep neckline made her look totally stunning. The guy chilled out instantly and told her he was just finishing some work, so she was impressed by his hustle and asked to see the papers, and he was totally fine with it. She was totally shocked that he'd written down every single tiny detail, but he explained that as a beginner, he has to track everything so he doesn't miss the important stuff. LaCroix stayed quiet for a second, then said in a super smooth voice that having a secretary like him around keeps everyone totally chill. He just laughed at her and was about to thank Lakra, but suddenly she threw herself on top of him and forced his head around, so he had no choice but to look at her. The Wanderer is totally freaking out, but she just sits right on his lap, strokes his face, and tells him she's actually just there for some advice. This inspection wasn't just for show, and after feeling him up, she grabbed his chin to look him dead in the eyes. She told me she was hunting for a book on how to bring people back to life, and the guy's face dropped the second he heard that. He suddenly jumped out of his seat and headed straight for the window. He leaned against the wall and let out a massive sigh. LaCroix just watched him, looking totally worried and confused. This guy was totally in the loop, and he and the king knew from the start that Laker was just hunting for whatever was left behind. This was the first time anything like this had happened since he got to this world. Lacra's impatience totally caught him off guard. He was actually pretty annoyed that she switched the topic to that. He said those exact words right to Lecrae. She stood there, totally shocked by what she just heard. It meant her charm magic didn't work on him at all. He didn't. She's crying from pure embarrassment and wants him to forget everything, but he's not doing that because he's actually stoked she did it. Lakra was totally mortified. Tears were literally streaming down her face. She couldn't understand why her magic was failing her. She had to snap out of it and get through this super awkward. He figured her charm magic hits them straight in the brain, and Lakra totally agreed, explaining that one look into their eyes lets her power smash through their defenses and take control. The secretary told her straight up that her charms were a total fail because his magic level was way too low to even be affected. One line out. Strictly, I should provide 3 lines if the input is 3 lines, but the input is provided as a block. Let's provide it as one continuous line of text. LaCroix was totally hyped and asked the secretary to pour her magic power straight into him, but just the thought of it made her turn bright red from embarrassment. The guy basically told her to just go ahead and seduce him, but the girl wasn't having it and totally shut him down. He was super bummed out about it. Lecrae felt, to make sure the Demon King never returns, the Ugura General Directorate is locking up every secret file about him and Taboo. Back when he was still just Medj's puppet, he snatched a book called Sample 4, Studies of the Blue Demon Lord. I looked for info on a one-armed guy who can control the dead, and we found out there was actually a clue about him from way back. The book was nowhere to be found, so they started doubting Maya and sent a pro-nurse to secretly spy on her. She was super hyped to brag about her skills, claiming she's a master of high-level magic and exorcism, even though her latest fail was honestly just embarrassing for our guy to see. Lucra was totally lost and tried to claim she handled the meeting right, but she only ended up in this mess because she was in such a huge rush. Lacquer was totally freaking out because she completely blew her secret mission, but then the guy told her she could just go get the info out in the open instead. She actually had an official note from the main office, and there's no way Maya hid the book since she would have been totally banned from her activities if she did. She totally got that he was ready to crash, but a sobbing girl blocked his path thinking he'd actually help her out. This dude straight up asks her for tips on seducing people. LaCroix tells him to just drop it and move on. She's doing her best to get him to lower his guard, but this wanderer was totally fed up with having the girl around. He had zero plans to tell her anything about the book. But then, Lycra suddenly brings up the book herself. He had to play. He played it cool and asked about Lacrosse's magic book, knowing that setting up a barrier would make its powers finally show up. That's why she put barriers in the village churches, and while Lacroix was totally shocked, he explained that Alfie was the one who told him all about it. But honestly, Lacroix was totally chill about it. The barrier wasn't actually hurting anyone anyway. If that book ever touches her magic, she'll feel it vibrating from miles away. He asks about the barrier permits, and Lacroix hopes he can help her out, but the guy's just a secretary candidate with zero authority. Too bad for him, he didn't actually have the power to make any real moves. All he could do was go and talk it over with the king. Lecrae was totally over that. Lacroix saw his magic and thought she could totally take him, which made the guy so salty that even after they teamed up, he stopped being polite and didn't care at all that. Back in Medjus, Pope Euparo was hanging out with Archbishop Ucca inside the main Uyghur temple. Auka sent Lacret on a mission to finally bring that book back. She was awesome at a few things, but a total mess at everything else, leaving Papa Eukaro wondering why she was even picked in the first place. Auka laughed that picking a total airhead like Lacra would make Maya drop her guard, but the Archbishop secretly sent a second person anyway. That gray-haired dude already sent Jesus' squad over to the location. If Lacrai acts like a total klutz in the open, those elite subordinates will definitely grab the book. If the plan was actually genius, nobody would be complaining, and they definitely shouldn't have messed up their vibe with the thighs, but Uka was just acting totally chill. After the talk, the guy walked off while humming a little tune. He was totally convinced his plan was flawless. Out of nowhere, his pendant started glowing. He knew right away it was... Uka was totally floored that Lacra actually told the secretary candidate every single detail. Just then, some random guy started walking right up to him. Lacra explained that this new dude was... The old archbishop finally chilled out, glad the girl found a strong partner, while the guy with the mole under his eye just stood there smirking at them. He yelled over to Archbishop Uku to ask about Lacra's message, and the white-haired guy was totally stunned to see the priest standing right there. But just like that, he fell under the guy's spell and spilled everything about Lacroix. And surprisingly, things were going so well that Lacra might actually find the book faster than... The guy clearly hated what he heard, but winning was the only thing that mattered. The priest walked right up to the archbishop and handed him the papers. He was trying to get the green. The archbishop totally kept his cool and signed the paper right then and there. Once the permit was done, the priest finally got out of that place. I mean, who would actually want to stay under? The second he vanished from the room, the spell on the archbishop snapped, leaving Uka staring blankly out the window with no memory of ever meeting the priest. Before long, the guy made it to the palace. He met King Marito in the study and gave him the full breakdown of what happened. The king was totally hyped with the report. Then, this guy randomly starts teaming up with Lacra, and the king is actually totally cool with it since they can use him, just as the wanderer finally stands up from the couch. He told the king Lacra was way too distracted to focus, so it only made sense to send someone else to check if merchants were hiring mages as secret muscle. The black-haired guy asks King Marito about the book and what he's going to do with the girl, so the king tells him they're out of time and need to start decoding. This guy was just sitting on a rock deep in thought. That's why I wasn't really paying attention to anyone else. Meanwhile, Ulfi and Lacroix were busy sorting through their magic loot. Lacroix walks up and tells him she's all set, asking what the next move is, but he's totally caught off guard thinking she's actually asking about the book. He finally got the okay to set up a barrier, so Lacroix started at the front gate and spread it all along the walls until the whole city was totally surrounded. This buys them some extra time to stay ahead of Lacra. This is the only way to make sure the book stays hidden during the search. He was stressed that someone else might be hunting for the book besides just Lacra. Ulfa and Ilias kept a close eye on the guy as he talked to Lacra. It was clear as day that these two had become super close friends. Ulfa mentioned how caring he told Lecrae to go check out his hideout in the Doko Lu cave and then asked if she was actually any good at fighting monsters. Lacroix was super confident, but since the guy didn't believe a word she said, she had to prove her skills right then and there as a cube barrier popped up above her. That lacquer shield is seriously tough and weak hits won't even scratch it, so the guy tells Ulfa to blast the barrier with everything she's got, and the white-haired girl steps up to Lecrae and smashes it with all her power. Once the dust cleared, Ulfa saw the barrier was still perfectly fine. She didn't even leave a single scratch on it. Lacroix was feeling pretty good about how strong she was. The girl wanted to see if Lacra's shield was the real deal. And since Lacra didn't mind, Ilias looked at how hard Ulf hit and decided to put some. Elias slammed her sword into Lacra's barrier, and the hit was so powerful that cracks actually started spreading across it. Lacro is totally stunned when Ulfa gets sent flying by that massive hit. And Ilias knows this barrier is super tough, so she's going to have to go all out if she wants to break it. Lacro just proved he's on a whole different level of strength. Even if Ilias wasn't going all out, no ordinary guy should have been able to shatter her barrier. He grabs a shovel and starts digging into the dirt. Then he tosses what he found right at the girl's shield. Lacra looks up to see what hit it. A huge swarm of bugs is anicaps. She was totally terrified because now she's stuck inside that barrier since Lacra can't even budge it. And man, Ilias was always blown away by the crazy stunts this. The guy asks Lacra to change the barrier's shape, but she can't do it. And when he suggests blowing the bugs away with wind magic, she tells him she can't pull. He sighed and told her that using poison gas against these guys would only lead to trouble. Lacroix was totally desperate and didn't know what to do. She needed someone to get those nasty. Lacroix was finally free. The girl was totally devastated by how mean he was. He didn't think he did anything wrong though, since he just called out her biggest weakness. Ilias. Time skips ahead, and the sun starts to set over the city. Down in a shady alley, a mysterious guy in a hood is making his way to the secret spot. He finally hits the room was totally spotless, but this guy didn't care about that at all. He reached out and touched the magic orb. His boss was waiting for an update. He reported that the master realized the girl had finally found a legit ally she could trust. The guy just stood there, waiting to hear what he should do next. That priest with the mole under his eye? One of the priest's guys told him that Lacra's new partner looked totally bizarre. He's got pitch black hair and dark eyes. Plus, the guy couldn't sense even ease. He also let them know that this guy was totally connected to Elias. The priest warned his man to stay sharp and watch every move. He sent a bunch of backup to join him right away. This long-haired priest was just standing in the study. He had his hand resting right on a magic orb. He was just standing there, totally focused on what he was going to do next. Back at the church, the Pope was totally ripping into the Archbishop because you can't just work with other countries without explaining yourself, or you'll end up wrecking your reputation with everyone else. The Pope tells Yuke to reach out to King Thias, makes the gray-haired guy call back his mercenaries, and the Archbishop says he's totally on. Luca should have reached out to Lacra and the mercenaries, but he suddenly realized he didn't even know who those guys actually were. Out of nowhere, someone calls out his name, and Uka is totally hyped to see it's actually his friend. The guy wasn't listening to the old man's yapping at all, so he used his creepy voice to put the Archbishop back under his spell, ordering Yuke to let him deal. Back in the capital, Theseus is strolling through an alley when he runs into his buddy Gadsden, and even though he gives him a big smile, the old man isn't surprised to see him. Gadsden didn't have a place to call home in the city of Thias. Basically, the guy was living on the streets. Since he spent all his time wandering around, he knew every little thing. Buying him a drink is the best way to get the inside scoop. This guy actually used that trick to take her out before. Gadsden reported that everything in the city was still the same. The guy sits right next to Gadsden and warns him that some seriously bad dudes are coming, but the old man just brushes him off, and the traveler is just trying to keep Gadsden safe and out. He snatched up the coin with a huge grin. Then, Gadsden started packing up his gear. He finally got exactly what he was after. As long as the cash keeps flowing, the guy with the awesome hair said he was out farming with the dude's money, and Getsun promised to split the massive haul with him if the crops turned out great. The guy just smirked because he was totally hyped for what was coming. But right after Gadsden took off, an emergency message from Lacrosse showed up the very next morning. Megis told her to spill everything to the king of These, so the guy rushed over to Moreto for advice on how to find that book. The king just burst out laughing at that. Lockwell had already told him every little detail without hiding a thing. The girl was honestly just too innocent. Marino and the guy finally stepped into the room. The guy hands them some high-tech special suits. The king sees the Pope is totally losing it after hearing the news. This whole situation could seriously mess things up between their kingdoms. Everyone starts gear. They knew they were totally out of time. Everyone quickly suited up in their costumes. Their plan was to return the book later by acting like they found it in a treasure chest. Then, they They swung the door open and found a room with a huge magic circle drawn on the ceiling. Sitting right on the table was a totally forbidden book. They built this place specifically so the guy didn't even try to deny it since he was totally prepared. And he told King Marito to stop whining while they started cracking the book's code. But the stuff they found inside, they took a quick breather, but then it hit him. This book was a total disaster for the entire world. These ancient symbols and notes were a total nightmare to read. And since the Demon Lord lived over 500 years ago, the dates were all messed up. But it turns out jumping between parallel worlds. The big problem was that the mages didn't even know what the book said, because if they could actually read it, the Uyghur religion would have sent every soldier they had to get it back. This guy wanted to return the book right away and act like they were never involved. And even though the king was totally down for that, Raguto wasn't having any of it. He just lets out a huge sigh, because this book is loaded with dangerous secrets. But then he suddenly spots something totally mind-blowing. He warned Marito about the dangerous secret, knowing that if the Ugurianism group found out, they would have destroyed this book instantly. The guy started reading from the page in a super creepy voice. Right then, Marito and Raguto were totally frozen in shock. They couldn't believe the crazy stuff they were hearing. Gazan strolled down the alley, sipping on his free drink while thinking about how weird it was that some guy kept bringing him the good stuff and actually treating him like a normal person. Getson was just about to head out when a sudden noise caught his ear, making him stop and listen closely to see what was going on. Gadson remembered the old man who lived here was long gone, so he realized these were just intruders and decided to scare them off with a massive shout. The guy stopped dead as he remembered the warning about dangerous people nearby, but God's aunt didn't even have a second to move before he got jumped. The priest's goons were annoyed by the mess, but they didn't really care since the guy was just some random homeless dude. To hide the fact they just took out the old man, the king refused to hear a single word from that book, and nobody wanted anything to do with her, leaving Ragdor shaking in total panic at the whole mess. He knew returning that book was a total mistake. Then Marita suggests he just tells the Yugura priests he finally cracked the code. But if he does that, those guys will definitely. Marito tried to say he was just looking out for the TSA's future. He felt like he was the only one who could do it. But deep down, this guy realized he was in a total mess, and since he hoped the book was just a story, the Wanderer started asking around about all the local thugs and mercenaries. They were digging into the book's secret history, but Marito kept his mouth shut about the other players to make sure the guy stayed safe. But this guy didn't care at all because he was ready to spill every secret before the torture even started. And since he already knew everything in that book, there was absolutely nothing they could do to stop him. They tried to use memory wiping magic, but the guy was too drained to pull it off, so Tom only got info on the mercenaries. The king totally gets the guy's struggle, but he's still sticking with his own people. But the Wanderer wasn't taking any chances with anyone who'd just hand him over. Suddenly, he's already standing right behind the guy. The Wanderer didn't even feel him sneak up. Then, the mercenary just taps his shoulder. He was just about to turn around when the king's shout stopped him in his tracks. There was no way Tom should have known who that mercenary actually was. This traveler was all ready. This mercenary was the king's personal bodyguard. He uses magic to stay invisible while keeping the king safe from the shadows. He was easily the strongest warrior in this frozen land. Marito felt totally safe as the guy felt like he was totally set up to fail on the job, so Marito hired him as his own private worker, and the mercenary was all in. This mercenary was basically stalking the guy 24/7. That's how he knew for sure that Tom was actually someone he could trust. When the guy caught the king off guard at the buffet, back when they crashed, the guy almost went for it but backed out at the last second. This news totally freaked the other dude out. He couldn't even tell if the guy was... This merc was a magic pro who could dodge falling rocks without breaking a sweat. If anyone saw his face, he'd have to take out every single witness. That's why the guy spilled everything he knew about these hired killers. The king was just chilling and sipping his tea when he suddenly spotted something. Marito noticed the guy looked totally miserable after talking to his mercenary. Finally, the guy makes his way out of the palace. He watches the sun come up, feeling exhausted after spending the whole night digging for info on that book. Just then, Ilias calls out to... Ilias found out he'd been stuck at the castle all night long. She was convinced he was actually spending time with Lakra. He could tell she was getting the wrong idea and knew he had D. He apologized for keeping her in the dark, and even though Ilias was feeling super lonely, he still shouldn't have broken his promise, but the guy finally realized just how much Ilias missed. She got super embarrassed thinking he and Lakra had a secret, and just as she started feeling totally left out, He called her out for being lonely. Ilias felt totally awkward after what he said. She snapped at Tom to just shut his mouth. But she wasn't the only one, because Ulfa was looking pretty stressed too. Out of nowhere, someone shouts for Ilias, and he realizes something crazy went down earlier that morning. It hits him that someone just got taken out. Something in the alley catches his eye, and she explained the guys were just totally wasted and slammed into the wall, but then they spotted a farming book that fell out, and it turns out this dude just finally found his reason for living. The traveler grabs the bag with the drink. He didn't think the guy died just because he drank too much. After all, the flask was filled with the same stuff he'd given. Ilias saw the guy was deep in thought, and once he heard Gadsden's body was being moved to Maya's church, he knew he had to tag along. The scout reported that there wasn't a single trace left behind after the guy was taken out. It's pretty obvious someone wiped him off the map. Even though Gadsden took a nasty fall, they finally made it inside the church. The guy was just waiting to hear what they found. Ilias started checking out Gadsden's lifeless body. It didn't take long for the check. The second he heard the investigation results, his face fell into a huge frown, and he just stared into space with these creepy hollow eyes that totally freaked Ilias out. She saw how bad he was doing and grabbed his arm. Her heart was racing like crazy from pure panic. He told her in a super gloomy voice that he was going to the castle to talk to Mari. He tried to keep her out of the mess, but she's already jumped right in. The Wanderer didn't want her owing him anything, but Elias just couldn't stand by. Ilias told him it's way better to mess up together than to let him face it all by himself. He was totally speechless and couldn't even find the words to respond. He told Ilias just waited for the guy to chill out and quit, and since his emotional outburst landed him in this mess, he had no choice but to go along with what the girl wanted. They had to rush to the castle before Lakra could even get back to them, and Ilias was actually pretty stoked about that. But before long, they were standing right in Marito's. The guy explained that she's dead set on starting a business and won't listen, so the king basically told him to just ditch her. But the Wanderer didn't bail because he figured it was way better to keep her in the loop than to just ditch her. The king straight up told them this whole situation was a massive, annoying. He warned him that everything was on the line. It wasn't just her friends at risk, but her connection with the Wanderer too. But Ilias stayed totally chill. If they couldn't listen, she was so locked in that she was ready to ditch everyone she knew, and the king finally realized there was no way he could break her. So he hit me up to go after the boss. I mean, the whole mess was his fault anyway. The guy just sighed and tried to start talking. Then the girl raised her hand, ready to. Then the guy tells them they can finally take down Lockrock. Ilias snaps her hand up in a total blur. What exactly was he so afraid of? But the girl was actually Weibo. So the guy starts breaking it all down step by step, kicking things off with those Ugurian guys who worship the Demon King. But Ilias just throws her hand up again because she's totally. So the guy broke it down so Ilias could actually follow along, finishing his story with the big reveal that they finally cracked the book's code. Elias was totally lost on why Lekrak had to be taken out, especially since the Ugur priests just wanted their book back and the truth about Maya. Lacroix wasn't the only one on this mission, meaning other scouts could be hiding anywhere in the city. But Meiji didn't say a word about them when he begged for help. These scouts were actually secret mercenaries who probably took that guy out this morning, but they were seriously running out of time. Archbishop Uka was the one calling all the shots for Lecrae, but only Papa Yukaro was actually taller than him, and he was the one who asked to work together just to keep things from getting ugly. But even after they promised to stay peaceful, Gazan still got some. Turns out these mercs have a secret boss in the Ugur church who hates Pope Uparo, and they're all hunting for one specific book. Right now, Lakrik is the only one who can actually grab that book, but the bad guys aren't planning on giving it back. They're gonna jump her and kidnap her. Now, they're finally talking about the most dangerous thing yet. The bad guys knew exactly what was in that book, which is why they wanted it so badly. But it didn't actually have. This book tells the story of how the Blue Demon King was born using rebirth magic and tracks every single thing he does. Alias was totally blown away by the news. This guy told her the book was actually packed with secrets about the Demon King. For a second, she wondered if he was keeping it all AE. Papa Uparo and his crew probably won't be able to read the book, and since Lecrae needs to keep their biggest secrets hidden, the translation is useless to them. But the crazy part, only the Meijis knew about this secret book, and even Papa Yukaro had no clue what was actually inside. Some Ugurians out there know exactly what the Demon King is up to, and Her head was totally spinning from the info overload, so he reminded her that some Uyghur priests are hiring their own mercenaries to hunt down a secret book. Ilias finally realized the guy was just salty about wasting his time, and while the king thought it was hilarious, Marito asked what the move was, and the guy already had a plan ready to go. He huddled everyone into a corner to whisper his plan, and the guy was totally down for it. He was fuming because his friend got wiped out, so he knew he had to do this. The king stayed totally chill while handing the guy the mission, and then the wanderer called out to Ilya. He basically asked if she was even ready to handle it. Right then, she slammed her. He walked out of the office and told them he was going to spill their whole secret plan. Seeing him like that totally broke the girl's heart. Ever since he saw Gadsden's body, this girl is actually living with this guy. That's why I thought I had him all figured out. But the truth is, he's got both a hero and a monster living inside him at Sid. She couldn't stand looking into those dark, empty eyes, and since she didn't want him seeing the world that way, she knew she couldn't just leave him all alone. She did exactly what Uka said and put up a barrier near the castle. And even though her magic didn't work perfectly, Lacra was still super happy. Suddenly, she spots the guy just standing there waiting for her. Lacra demands to know why he even called her out there. Turns out, the secretary finally has the scoop on where that book is. Lacroix was stoked he found the book, and she totally trusted him. But then he dropped a bombshell. It's written in a crazy language from another world and literally explains how to bring people back from the dead. She was totally sure they'd never be able to read that book. But those pictures were basically a cheat sheet for the resurrection spell. That's why she wasn't even sweating it. But everyone in the crowd started freaking out right away, and even though he wasn't trying to get mixed up in this mess, they were totally going to give her the book. But only after this guy said I could translate the book in Thez, but that was straight up impossible because those people aren't supposed to know anything about tech. And that wasn't even the only thing. The book is packed with other forbidden secrets, and the guy explains the king only hired him because he can actually read that weird language. And thanks to her powers, Lacroix knows he's telling them they needed to hear from Archbishop Yuke and maybe even Pope Uparo, but if they didn't want to help, the book was going right back to them. When the clock strikes midnight, this dude is going to be at the fountain waiting for their big decision. He's taking that book with him no matter what they say. And the craziest part? Lacquer was totally crushed by the news and rushed off to call her bosses. But since clerics can spot lies, they actually miss the truth because they just don't suspect people for no ideas. The problem is they're way too trusting. So if Lacrab talks to the Archbishop, his message is definitely reaching that sneaky gray cardinal pulling the strings from the shadows. This gloomy guy was just waiting for the big shot cardinal to walk right into their trap. He was super confident in his plan while the mercenary priest watched everything go down. They found out the book was... The long-haired dude pointed right at the guy who just got wrecked. He says if Lacquer makes it out alive, they're off the hook. But that deal definitely isn't. This was a total game changer for him, since things would get way more intense if this guy was actually from Earth. So the priest immediately started reporting the news to the Red Demon Lord. It was the middle of the night. Our guy, Ilius, and Ulfe were all just waiting around for Lacroix to show up. The mercenaries saw what was happening and knew the hell. Ilias is a top 5 beast who just totally wrecked Dokelu, so now the leader is way too scared to try a direct attack. The beast man was a total joke, and even though the girl had insane magic, she was such a newbie that they could just mess with her head to win, while the guy was just a regular. The mercenary boss knew Lacra was the biggest threat on the field. Everyone joked about her being a total airhead, but she was a completely different beast once the fighting started. She was a straight. If Lacra and Ilias team up, the enemy will be forced to run away. So numbers 1 and 2 are going to distract Ilias while the rest of the squad takes out Lacra. The guy showed everyone the book was the real deal. He waited to see if they'd actually go for his deal. But the girl was told to shut him down and just give the book back. Lacroix knew that book was bad news, but he had to return it just to keep the church mages happy. He was totally bummed out until a loud noise suddenly echoed from the distance, and Ilias rushed off to see what was happening. The mercenary realized they weren't the targets, but then Ilias suddenly stood up and left. This was actually a lucky break for them. The boss told number 1 to go after I. The mercenary boss saw his opening and knew it was time to strike. Since everyone was distracted by the book, he planned to wipe Lacra out right then and there. Basically, the whole squad aimed their weapons. Ilias teleports right next to the guys and starts wrecking the mercenaries, launching one dude straight through a house while another gets totally obliterated. Lucra was totally lost and had no clue what was happening. But then a guy suddenly snatched her up and yelled at her to put up a barrier right now. Right then, a giant cube shield popped up and trapped both of them inside. That barrier was the only thing that saved them from getting hit. Talk about a close call. But Lacroix was... He finally realized what was happening and put the girl down to apologize, but the mercenary leader just started laughing at them. He was totally stunned that Ilias blocked a 5-man ambush from that far away, but she wasn't even sweating it because she knew exactly when they were going to strike. She made the call. The moment she created a gap, everyone was going to jump Lacroix. The guy just stared at her, noticing how confident she looked, even though it wasn't her idea. But then he realized these guys were actually magic-using mercenaries. Lacroix couldn't wrap her head around why her own parents wanted her dead. There was just no way Uka would... The Wanderer told her that someone was pulling the strings from the shadows. This mysterious person was the one who hired mercenaries to destroy everything. Lacroix was completely shocked. She had no clue who would even... Elias dropped into a fighting stance, ready to scrap. The girl thought there were only 3 mercenaries left to deal with. But surprise, surprise, the 4th mercenary actually survived her attack. The mercenary leader thought they were in a great spot with Lacroix trapped in her barrier, so he ordered his crew to charge straight at the Beast Woman and Ilias. Ilias was sure that just 3 people didn't stand a chance against her. Even the leader agreed, so they weren't going to try a direct fight. Suddenly, a massive wave. Ilias realized the mercenaries used magic to ditch them, but then someone suddenly attacked Lacroix's shield, so she had to power it up because if she lets it drop, the guy is totally done. The attacks just kept coming non-stop. Ulfe was dodging everything like a total pro, but since she couldn't see clearly, she was really struggling. Lacroix was getting seriously. Lacroix was totally stunned, because even though the guy wasn't lying, his dark expression was honestly terrifying. The Wanderer realized his face was giving away his scary thoughts, so he relaxed, forced a smile, and told the girl to just stay calm. Ulfe managed to dodge the attack but was totally gassed, so she faked a surrender to the mercenary while secretly charging up her magic power. Ulfa acted like she was surrendering while secretly charging her mana. A massive swirl of energy started floating all around her, and the mercenary just stood there completely blown away by her insane power. Ulfe yelled out the name of the special move her master taught her. She aimed her fist right at the mercenary, but the guy didn't even think she was on his level. The girl dropped her hands, and just as the guy tried to land a hit, Ulfa suddenly clapped. A massive boom sent the mercenary flying across the room. Lacroix was totally shocked. Ulf's big secret wasn't even a trick. He just clapped his hands together while dumping a massive amount of magic into them. While Maya was teaching them how to fire off magic, a mosquito buzzed right in front of Ulfa's charged-up hands, so she slammed them together to take it out. The result was absolutely insane. No one was hurt, but they were all shaking with fear. Even Ilias froze up for a second. This thing would easily take down any normal person. The mercenary was totally dazed by the cotton, so Ulfa charged right at him, and as he shook with fear trying to stop her, she just launched herself high into the air. She swung her leg high, screaming that Ulta was going to win, and then she slammed her foot right into her opponent. Ophel sticks the landing while the assassin stays down for the count, and she pumps her fists, shouting that she finally won. Tensley screams at his squad, asking how they're losing to a total nobody, but Ilias points his sword right at him and asks if he really just called Ulfe a loser. Ilias says Ulfe is a total diamond in the rough, who's already gotten insanely strong after training for only a month. The gang member stops yapping and fires an arrow into the night, shouting that Otho will be terrified later. But Ilias just deflects every attack and says he's getting bored while gripping his sword with both hands. Ilias is dead serious and shouts that she's finishing this killer off right now. He barely has a second to realize he's in big trouble. Before he can even blink, the killer gets sliced clean in half and drops dead, while Elias shouts that even if she can't see, she can still feel him right there. Another attacker tries to figure it out, guessing she was just messing with them early. Ilias admits she was just testing his power and says everyone is way weaker than Dokola, which the killer totally expected since Dokola was a legend who turned into a massive jerk. The killer realizes he's in deep trouble and probably won't win, so he decides to distract the girl while taking out the rest, starting with the man as his main target. But then a new plan hits him as he notices Ulfe is totally wiped out and distracted, making her the perfect hostage. So he claims he's got no other choice and suddenly pulls. He makes up his mind, pulls his dagger, and rushes Ilias. But as she blocks the blade, it turns out to be a total fake-out when a smoke bomb explodes right. The knight instantly holds his breath and yells that it's a smokescreen, while the killer zips right past her to get to Alpha with the book. The merc snatches the book, and starts trash-talking them for leaving it out. But his victory is cut short when a surprise attack from above slams right into his arm. Suddenly, someone bashes him in the head with a massive hit. The killer's hand flies way up into the air. They didn't even give him a second to react. The merc starts scanning the area to figure out where that came from. And suddenly, he spots something on the roof right in front of him. Grandfather Cargo is actually standing right on top of it, and the killer knows he's in deep trouble, so he spins around and screams for his goon to get over there and help him out. Before he can even finish saying who needs help, he sees his own body getting sliced right in half by Salvet Ragudo. And man, this guy looks like a total nightmare. The assassin boss yanks a spear out of the dirt and starts calling everyone out, naming the god of the spear and the owner of the strongest knight thighs. He flashes a wild smile at the hero and asks if he's the one behind this, then slowly stands up with his hands in his pockets and says, "This is actually a pretty smart way to deal with guys like him." The leader finally admits he's done, realizing they never would have fought if the whole squad showed up at the start. But the hero just gives a scary look and says he planned the delay to trick them into thinking they actually had a chance. The hero starts breaking down his genius plan, explaining how Ilias escaped through a path made by a specific sound, while Lacroix was stuck on defense and couldn't do a thing. Only Ulfa was left, and since he didn't look like a threat, he figured that if the path is wide open, you're obviously going to take it. The assassin boss is shocked by how much the hero wants him dead, but our guy just stares him down with a freezing look of rage and says this is total payback for killing the tramp. The gang leader is literally shaking, asking if he's for real, but the hero just coldly confirms they're all going to die for that exact reason before demanding to know who killed him. The killer mocks him, asking what a guy who got totally wrecked by a she-wolf right at the start could possibly have to say for himself, right? Our hero doesn't fall for the bait and just says he knows the leader faked his death, making the guy's face go totally dark while the killer starts shaking like crazy. The leader gets super nervous because the hero has these terrifying eyes that make him look like a villain, but the guy quickly clears the air by saying he's never actually killed anyone, not even once. The killer brags that he's got a whole squad of assassins backing him up, so the leader immediately tosses another smoke bomb and retreats, screaming that things just got way more dangerous. Ilya shouts that there's no way she's letting him escape and slashes him until he's coughing up blood, but the killer still manages to slip away, creepily thanking them because losing his arm actually made him feel better. Ragudo carefully pulls the sound and says he's finally free, and while everyone else is frozen in place, Lacra suddenly jumps up with a massive shout. She's totally freaking out because the book is gone, shaking the poor hero for a plan while he just groans about what a massive headache this is. She stops dead, stares him down, and calls him a total liar, but instead of getting mad, he just gives her a wicked grin because he's actually hyped she saw right through it. While making his escape, the killer realizes he still has the book even though he didn't take anyone out, so he drops into a quiet street, wraps his cloak around his wound, and decides to bail since he can always try again later. He grips a shiny dagger and goes to slash the wall, but suddenly it starts glowing and reacting to the book as the whole wall begins to shake like crazy, leaving the killer totally stunned and wondering what. He realizes this is Lacra's barrier, remembering her warning that if the book's magic touches it, the powers will react and let her sense him from miles away. The killer stays totally chill because even if she knows he's there, he'll be over that wall and gone before anyone catches him, so he starts scaling it right now. He's clawing his way up the steep wall with just one hand and a dagger, realizing it's way harder than it looks. He starts to say he's shocked Dakala can actually do this, but he suddenly cuts himself off and whips around when he senses something behind him. Another punch slams right into his jaw, but this time it's so powerful that the mercenary gets blasted straight through the wall. Our hero slowly walks up to the massive hole to see the damage. He remembers that the second the book started reacting to the barrier, he told Ilias to chuck something at it with everything he had. The hero is totally shocked that Marito agreed to the plan so. He figured Grandpa Kara would handle it since he's a legendary sniper, but when he asked if he could hit the castle walls from there, the old man said it was basically impossible. Ilias was right behind him, telling him to chill and let her handle it, and while the hero's thinking she's a total muscle-brained gorilla, he suddenly spots something weird in the wreckage. Our hero looks at the killer's wrecked body and knows that's just what happens when you get hit with that much power. So he pulls out the book and is stoked that Sir Ragudo's protection magic kept her completely safe. Out of nowhere, our hero spots a strange little ball and tries to figure out what it is, while back at the castle, the nervous crowd starts shouting for the candidate herself. Our hero is chilling in a chair right across from Merito, with that book and the ball he found sitting on the table while Lacroix tries to get him to explain everything. He just tells her to hang on and cracks one eye open because the truth is about to drop. while the whole crowd is waiting in total suspense and Ulfa is just fast asleep outside the door. Suddenly, the ball starts glowing with magic and a voice demands a report from the beaten assassin, Haiti. But then our hero speaks up from the other side, mocking Haiti's name before letting. The mystery guy jumps at the voice but then cracks a creepy smile and asks, "Who's there?" So our hero gives him a wicked grin and says he's the exact guy they were ordered to kill. The priest guy realizes his plan to spread hate totally flopped. And since the hero actually waited for his message, it's obvious he needs something from him, right? Lakra tries to speak up, but Ragudo shuts her down with a quick wave and a head shake as the hero tells the guy he just wanted a chance to talk. The client explains he told the killers to bring the head because he can still get info from a dead guy, and then he places his hand right on the sphere. Our MC grumbles that this is a pretty weird hobby, but he says he gets it. He cuts straight to the point and asks the guy what his name is and what he should call it. The hero nods at Lakra, but she just shakes her head since she didn't catch his name, so he tells Lahit it's great to meet him and to just ask if he's got any questions. Lahit laughs and says it's actually super easy, then asks the hero if he's got any more questions before stopping for a second to make things feel really tense. He finally reveals who he really is, but the hero just mocks him, asking if he's anything more than the Demon Lord's little lapdog. Lahit keeps that creepy smile on his face, freezes for a second, and then asks how the hero even figured it out. Our hero finally shows his hand, bragging that he cracked the code and it was actually super easy. But when Lahit tries to act all curious and asks what it said, the hero shuts him down and he's certain Lahit knows what's in the book and tried to kill the hero to keep him quiet. But Lahit just claims he did it for fun, leaving Ilias, Lakra. The hero totally ignores him and keeps poking at the ground, asking if Lahite is scared of getting caught working with the Demon Lord just to turn into a monster himself. He stammers out, "What are you?" But the hero cuts him off, telling him he's losing faith in his words and needs to keep it together. Suddenly, everyone goes dead silent and freezes in their tracks, but our hero doesn't care and answers anyway, revealing that the book is actually a secret log of everything the Blue Demon Lord did. This former human used revival magic to bring the guy back as a Blue Demon Lord, and he made sure to write down every single thing that happened to him. This book tracks every detail of their lives and powers because the author was watching them from the start, planning to turn them into demon lords all along. Believe it or not, this same author was actually the one who killed them. But he also hooked them up with some serious strength. Every demon lord started out with the same basic set of skills. First, every single overlord was handed their own special power. But why is this thing even called a book on necromancy anyway? The Blue Demon King was the one calling the shots for the entire undead army. Winsing tells Lehate that the hero actually cracked the code on that book, and Lehate's like, "Wait, is this guy actually from Earth?" The hero admits he's right, but points out it's a shame Lehate clearly isn't a local. Lehate asks how he can be so sure, so the hero explains that Our hero asks if he should explain why he called Lahit a total lapdog, saying that since the book leaks the Lord's secret powers, he was going to keep it quiet. But he changed his mind the second Lahit tried to steal it. Lahit paces the room, asking how the hero knows about the book since the church tried to return it, but the hero just claps back that Lahit is the one keeping the priest in the dark. Lahit grins and asks why the priest is clueless about what's inside, making the hero let out a tired sigh before dropping the dark truth. The dead demon lords are coming back, and if the church had known that, they definitely would have handled things way differently. Lahit realized the book said exactly what he expected, smirking as he finally put the pieces together, but one thing still didn't make sense. Even if he was working for the demon lord, our hero finally starts putting the pieces together, realizing it all goes back to Dokela, that half-breed killer, and we finally see why he turned on his country to swipe the book and hand it. The hero keeps the logic going, questioning how an earthling who couldn't even read the book managed to find out about that forbidden resurrection magic. The hero says he got the truth from Lahite back when Dachala was still a cold-blooded killer. He realized someone was secretly pulling Archbishop Yuke's strings from the shadows. Dokal swiped the book to use as leverage, but he quickly realized he was in way over his head. So now he's only trusting the people he can actually boss around. Suddenly, this guy from Earth shows up, and right before Dokala kicks the bucket, he hands him the mysterious book. He probably thought this human was the only one who could unmask. Lahide totally agrees with the hero, saying Dukala was on another level for actually being able to notice him. Our hero calls him out, asking if this was just a shortcut for Lahitiu, who was hiding in the Yuguro church but couldn't grab the book himself, so he used Dokela. It was a massive risk, but it was his only shot to finish the mission. And even Lahite had to admit that humans are actually way smarter than they look. The hero jumps in and says he actually sounds serious, but Lahite just thinks he's a big-mouthed moron and mocks him for basically calling himself out. Lahite realizes information is a deadly weapon, and since the hero is bragging and leaking all his secrets, it's just plain stupid, leaving the hero totally speechless. He fires back that he doesn't care about being logical, he just wants to stay safe, then tells Lahite that if he played it smart, he'd end up just like him. Lahite calls the hero out for being super disrespectful and asks if he's really going to feel guilty about doing something like that. The hero says it's because he's still way too weak. All he wants is a chill life where he can finally relax, but then, a door gets totally smashed open right behind Lahite. The hero finishes by warning them that guys like him are going to step in and stop this, while the door keeps cracking and popping as someone tries to bust through. Finally, the wood gives way to our hero reveals he used Archbishop Maya to set a trap, knowing the mastermind would slip up. And it turns out Leahy is the traitor. Just then, the priest bursts through the door. The Archbishop and the Lord's servant are squaring off and sizing each other up. And while Yuke is totally fuming, Leahy stays super chill and arrogant, telling Yuke that his hypnosis clearly. Lahitu tries to hypnotize the Archbishop, but the trick fails completely, making Uki even more furious as he screams that such pathetic magic would never work on him. Lahitu realizes his hypnosis is failing because this old geezer actually came prepared with mental shields, and now the Archbishop is having his priests box him in, telling him he's totally trapped and needs to. Lahito says he's actually interested now and starts copying the spell with his hand, making 5 tiny runes pop up around Yuke, as he tells him he totally messed up that part. Sharp spikes suddenly shoot out from the runes right where Uka was standing, but the Archbishop manages to dodge at the very last second. While he's still healing up, Lehigh too helps him over to the door and says his final goodbye. Uke warns him not to sleep on his skills before slamming the guy into the dirt with magic, making Lahiti wonder if it's gravity until he spots a massive magic circle glowing right above his head. He realizes the priest used a magic circle right above him, and Lahite is blown away by that insane gravity pressure, especially since this guy is supposed to be the weakest archbishop. Uki doesn't even try to deny it, straight up admitting he's way weaker and hasn't accomplished nearly as much as the other archbishops. The runaway hangs on every word as the priest declares he's still the archbishop no matter what, looking totally locked in and ready to stand his ground. He keeps the gravity pressure on and tells Lahite it's game over, but Lahite somehow finds the strength to lift a finger and fire back, saying he wouldn't be so sure about. Those magic runes appear over the archbishop again, crushing his spell and shooting out sharp spikes as the fugitive gets back up and heads for the door. OK dives out of the way to dodge the hit, and while Lahitu mocks him for the close call, OK catches a weird scent and starts stumbling as the priest claims it's game over. Lahito grabs his head and realizes they're breathing in sleeping incense right by the stairs, so he tries to throw up a barrier fast, but when he raises his hand, his powers just don't. He's standing there totally confused, wondering why his powers won't kick in. Luca tells him again that it's over. He warns him not to make him say it a third time. While he's checking out the sleepy incense, a tiny orb falls out of his clothes, and as he picks it up to get a closer look, he smiles because everything finally makes sense. With a dark grin, he tells Uka that this sealing stone was the only thing blocking his magic. Lahite tosses the rock aside, admitting he was way too careless. He wonders when the priest even had a chance to plant it on him, especially since barriers are usually only supposed to work around the person casting them. He bragged that he didn't just use 2 barriers, but he actually moved the second one to trap Lahate inside with the sleeping incense, saying this was exactly the kind of pro move you'd expect from the archbishop. Even the demon lord's own servant knows he's totally stuck because that stone is jamming his magic, and he's feeling super groggy from all that sleeping incense. He accepts the situation and whips out a dagger, thinking he's finally won, but Uka tells him that tiny knife won't do a thing, so he fires back that he can still. Lahite brags that he's still winning as long as he keeps his secrets, and just as Luca finally realizes the plan, he knows he's way too late to stop it. Lahite flashes a super creepy grin and holds a dagger to his throat, bragging that he outplayed everyone before saying his final goodbye. Suddenly, he slashes his own throat while giving the hero a smug look through the orb, and as his body hits the ground, the hero realizes he just lost the whole game. A bit later, the Meijis reported that Leihie ended his own life once he knew he was trapped, so they sealed his body up tight to stop anyone from trying to snatch it. Our hero is totally shocked that Archbishop Uka pushed Lahite so far that he actually ended his own life, but Lakra says it makes sense since Uka was his teacher. Our hero realizes her teacher is the reason she ended up this way. But this just proves they actually did something amazing. He's totally sure the Pope of Paro can handle it. Since Maya, I'm doing this to apologize for the mess, and since it's my responsibility, I've got to be the one to get that book back. The hero stands on the balcony and declares the case is finally over. But Marito stops him and asks, if his theory is right, then who was the man or demon lord that actually sent La? The hero lets out a tired sigh because he totally gets the situation. He tells the king to just go talk to Papayu Paro and handle it himself. Now the whole thing has become super awkward and complicated. Marito tries to get Popayo Paro to explain things to the hero, but he refuses and asks if a king should even be doing this, while the hero whines about having way too much work. Marito slumps against the railing, grumbling that the hero might actually take the crown, but he's totally lost in thought because he knows nothing's been settled. And the biggest challenge, the only catch, is that the rest of the squad still has no idea what's going on. They have to talk to Papa Yukaro first before they even think about what to do next. Our hero decides he just wants some peace and quiet, so he thanks Marito for everything and heads out, leaving Marito totally shocked since he was actually planning on seeing him again tomorrow. The hero's pretty hesitant and asks why he even needs this, but the king just wants him to spill all the details about his homeworld. The guy awkwardly scratches his head and asks if this is all just a cover to decode the book, but Marito explains they're using different strategies and the contract is definitely getting an extension. Our hero is totally backed into a corner and has to agree. He realizes his quiet life isn't happening anytime soon. Marito is standing right next to me with a huge smirk on his face. Our hero screams his lungs out to keep him away, and after they finish talking, he cautiously heads toward the church where he finds Maya standing right over Ulfa. The young wolf girl is just spacing out until she spots her master and her face totally lights up. She's sitting at the table working hard on her studies. The hero walks up and tells Aj. Maya grabs the hero's shoulder with a forced smile, calling him out for always plotting with the king while he just stammers out a super awkward apology. He tries to apologize, but Maya shuts him down, pointing out that even Ilias tried to trick her, and telling him to stop being such a bad influence on her daughter's best friend. She finally lets out a happy sigh and tells him he gets a passing grade just for showing up to apologize. Plus, she knows he's been a really good influence on Ilias. But Maya keeps talking, explaining how she's finally toughened up and stopped living in her dad's shadow, then tells the hero that since Ilias is her daughter's best friend, she finally stops her rant and tells them to wait while she makes some tea, leaving the hero looking totally annoyed. While Ulfe is right next to me scribbling away like crazy, first, he tells her he's sorry, but Ulfe just stares at him totally confused about why he's even apologizing. She asks if she messed up, but he admits he actually used her as bait last night. He realized that using Ulfe as bait was his smartest move since she looked the weakest, and it was the perfect way to lure those killers out into the open. He tells Ulfa he could have done things differently, but he chose to use her as bait instead. He admits he's just as bad as the Black Wolf tribe that made her life a... She zips up to her master and grabs his sleeve, telling him he's totally wrong and was just acting out of anger. The hero is completely lost, but she keeps going. Our hero finally gets what the little wolf is trying to say, and she tells him this is her most precious treasure, promising that if he's fighting for others, she's going to... The hero stands still for a second as sunlight pours through the church's stained glass. Ulfe keeps her grip on his sleeve, just staring at him without a word. He tells her. He finally sees she's grown into a beautiful girl who's actually tough, unlike those people who let their emotions get the best of them. But our hero is totally stuck in his own head and can't snap out of it. He finally gets that this is why Ilias has been chewing him out for so long. And the hero asks Ulfa if he wants to help grow some plants at home, and Ulfa is totally down, wagging his tail with excitement, but the hero realizes that even though he's hunting for Gazane's book to figure out what crops to plant, and when Ulfes complains about hating veggies, our hero just tells him he'll change his mind when he's older before deciding to leave some at the grave, even though Gazan would have definitely preferred some sake. The hero gives Ulfa a confident smirk and says he's got some bad news, making her heart pound with fear until he finally reveals that Lacroix is coming right for them. Ulfe keeps replaying the master's words in her head, but she just doesn't get why this is such a tragedy. It's crazy, because just a few hours ago, he looked up at the perfect weather and realized how good it felt to finally chill after all the crazy chaos he'd been dealing with lately. Ilias basically trashed this whole block when the assassins attacked, but now it's perfectly fixed like nothing happened. Magic is seriously insane. The hero's eyes are locked on her, and check it out. The wall Ilias smashed is already back up after just one night. Ragudo's crew clearly worked like crazy. Our hero is so busy chilling and enjoying the magic that he doesn't even notice Locra crying right next to his bench. He's totally zoned out, wishing he could use even. Locra just starts bawling his eyes out and making these totally panicked faces. Our guy finally notices her, but he immediately stands up to go grab some lunch, so Lacroix grabs his sleeve and asks if he's seriously just gonna blow her off like that. The hero is basically begging Lockrid to let him go so he can stay in a good mood, but she won't let go and demands he help her while crying about getting kicked out of. The hero thinks she finally got kicked out and gives her a pity pat on the shoulder, but Lecrest shuts that down and says she wasn't exiled at all. Our hero guesses she tried to help but just messed everything up until they kicked her out, and he's totally spot on. Our hero finally realizes she's basically a total disaster. She was supposed to wait at Maya's church for Yukaro, but she caused such a mess that they literally kicked her out. Plus, those barriers she made during the test were a total joke compared to other priests who are 10 times faster. And while the hero knew she'd get kicked out eventually, he never. Lacroix is literally clinging to the hero's shoulder begging for help, but he cold-heartedly tells her he's not good enough to fix her being useless and orders her to let. Lacroix lets him go but keeps following him, awkwardly mumbling that it's fine before asking if she can stay with him. But the hero shuts her down and leaves her looking. The hero casually shrugs it off, saying he lives at the house of Ilias and can't just let some random freeloader move in, leaving Lacroix totally stunned. Suddenly, she's only got eyes for heart, so she fakes a smile and mentions how a guy and a girl are living all alone together. But the hero cuts her off and reminds her but Lacroix's already got a plan, so she clears her throat and tells him he's totally gonna mess up if she isn't there to watch his back. The hero tells her everything is fine to keep her calm, even though the only mistake he could make is accidentally killing someone by hitting too hard. And while Lacra almost agrees at first, she quickly changes her mind and shouts no. She screams that she has to protect them from his shady plans, but the hero fires back saying she's the one with a secret motive, so he tells her to give up and just sleep. Lacroix starts begging the hero for help because she's totally oversleeping under a bench, and when she points to the straw right under him, he finally realizes she's actually been living there. Lacroix stops mid-complaint and starts sobbing about how lonely and terrified she is, making the hero realize he's totally stuck with her and her stubborn attitude. They track down Ilias just chilling and munching on a kebab, and when she hears the plan, she's totally cool with it. The hero is absolutely stunned because he didn't think The hero gets right in Ilias's face, demanding to know why she didn't just say no, while Lacra is already zooming around the square in pure hype, leaving Ilias totally clueless about what she even did wrong. She tells him straight up that as a noble knight she can't leave a girl out in the freezing cold, but the hero just asks if she's trying to act all cool. The hero tells everyone to chill and think for a second since there are only 3 bedrooms, and while he'd feel bad making the girls share, he can't exactly bunk with them either, so Ilias finally offers Alpha a room. The hero isn't giving up, calling her a total idiot and warning that her being useless is gonna mess things up for Ulfa, while Lacra wonders if he's being way too mean. Our hero actually gets Ilias to take things seriously, and once she admits he's right, Lacroix realizes even Iliasin is totally convinced. Ilya tells Lacroix he's stuck sleeping in the attic, so he just nods and starts packing his stuff to leave, but she quickly stops him and says she was only kidding. Ilya says the pantry has tons of space if they just tidy up, but the hero is totally not having it and thinks it's way too early to decide, so they definitely need to get. A few hours later, Ulfi tells Ulfa that everything is cool and she actually likes Lacra, giving her a big hug while the hero realizes he's been totally defeated. Our hero takes charge, ties a handkerchief on his head, and tells everyone they need to clean this place up fast. He asks Ulta for help, and when Lacroix tries to chime in, he shuts her down without a second thought. Our hero and Ulfa start cleaning out the pantry, and as Ulfa moves an old dresser to where the hero points, Lacra watches from the shadows and decides to pitch in by sneaking down the beach. She trips and goes flying with the box, making the hero's whole squad scramble to catch her. And later on, while Lacroix is relaxing in a wooden tub after cleaning, a spider starts. Lacra spots him and starts freaking out. Outside the door, the hero and Ulfe perk up the second they hear her scream. She's yelling that she saw Spider, the candidate Our hero asks Ulfe to cover for him, and she tells him it's all good since he has a perfect alibi, leaving him totally confused about where she even learned a word like that. Suddenly, another Lakra leaps out of the bathroom, points right at our hero and starts yelling her head off. The three of them start cleaning the room, but then Lakra spots a... She grabs it and heads right for him, but he sees her coming and tells her to cut it out. Suddenly, Lakra trips and dumps the whole bucket all over herself and Ulfa. Right after the chaos, the girls are already relaxing in the bath together. By the time evening hits, Ilias finally gets back to the house. She steps inside and shouts that she's home. The hero notices a third freeloader has already joined the crew, so Ulfi rushes over to say hi, while Ilias confirms she's finally home. She's totally shocked, because she had no idea there was this much stuff. There's literally a mountain of supplies from the storage room piled up right in front of them. Ilya explains, the MC notices this gear is actually top tier and says it must be super important to Ilias, who just smiles and starts spinning a sword she pulled out of nowhere. Ilias pulls the sword from its sheath and gives it a quick test swing, saying it brings back so many memories since the old king actually gave this blade to her dad. The hero brings up how her dad was a knight and her mom was a priest like Maya, and Ilias confirms it, saying she really looked up to them before sheathing her sword with a sharp clink. The hero asks if she's trashing their old gear, but Ilias says she's just sorting through the pile to donate it all to Maya's church and Ragudo's team. She pulls open a drawer to find 2 fresh outfits, and Ilias notices right away that they're a perfect fit for him. She thinks he'd look just as respectable as her dad if she's got a message from the king saying he wants to see the hero at the castle tomorrow morning. And while the hero is busy wondering if Marito really said that, LaCroix, Ulfe dashes into the kitchen to grab the dishes, and the hero bops Lakora on the head when she tries to help out too. Ilias heads upstairs while Lakora wipes the table in Uli. Once dinner's over, everyone hits the hay, and Lakra falls fast asleep while cuddling Alphon. The next morning at the palace, Ilias and the hero head down the hall to see, actually, the input is a single block. I will provide a single line of text. Final polish. Ilias is totally blushing and can't believe Morito stays totally calm and says he's standing right there, pointing his finger at the hero to prove it. Morito drops the bomb that he's a hero and the guy's eyes go wide with total shock. When the hero asks what's going on, Morito tells him the king jokes that if word gets out, more guys like Lahaitu will come for his head, and Morito wonders if the hero can even handle that. But even though the hero thinks the hero's like, wait, is Ilias really going to be my bodyguard? She gets totally offended and snaps back, asking if he's got a problem with that. Marto tells, the hero is sweating from pure hype, thinking Ilias would be the perfect choice if he wasn't such a handful, but then Morito catches on and asks with a smug grin if he just wishes. The hero is screaming inside because the king is totally baiting Ilias on purpose, and he wonders if this was the plan all along. As she starts shaking with rage, the hero just gives he thinks Ilias is the perfect choice no matter what. But just as he starts talking about how they get along, the king cuts him off to jokingly ask who he thinks his real match is. The hero thinks for a second and says, Grandfather Kara is the best knight of them all, which makes Ilias totally lose it. A bit later, Ilias and his grandpa Kara face off at the training grounds in full armor, while Illyria watches the spear fight with pure rage in her eyes. Ilias tries to hold back his rage, gripping his sword tight as he declares the fight is on, while she shouts at Grandpa Kara to go all out like his life depends on it, leaving the old man looking totally miserable that it's come to this. Ilias is giving off such a terrifying vibe that Grandpa Kara is literally shaking, so he asks the hero why the princess looks like she's about to kill him, but the hero Gramps Kara isn't buying that excuse and asks if there's more to the story, making our hero realize he actually called out Kara's name during the big choice, which Morito shuts that down immediately, saying the guard spot is already full and it'll be hard to fit him in. He asks if he should call the young knight over instead, but the hero says not to worry about it since that would make his talk with Ilias way too short. Morito just nods and says it's a done deal then. He tells Mrs. Rachel to guard the hero, and even though she's totally fuming, she follows orders. Then, after hearing the hero's story, Grandpa Kara he pulls the hero into a hug and tells him that being a guard is actually a super respectable job, and it would honestly feel wrong if anyone else took his place, leaving the hero totally shocked and asking if he's for real. Grandpa Kara is already stomping off and crying about how much this sucks. And while our hero tries to give a super awkward apology, the old man just tells him to count on him because it's a total honor. Our hero is finally watching Grandpa Kara and Ilias go at it, and it's wild because Ilias is strong as a pack of gorillas, but Grandpa is just as tough, So now even Ulfe is jumping in to help since she can't land a single hit on him alone. Our hero is totally shocked to see her and has no clue why she's even there. But then Ulfa screams at Ilias to get Grandpa onto his back, leaving the hero wondering. Our MC figures she's still salty about their first meeting and probably hates his guts, so he apologizes to his grandpa yet again. The duel kicks off as Kara's grandpa drops his chill attitude and charges straight at Ilias with a massive spear swing. He speeds up and launches a barrage of quick strikes, but Ilias blocks every single one of them. The hero yells that Grandpa is just as fast as she is, and she definitely hears. She says she finally gets what real speed is all about. A nasty smirk spreads across her face. Kara's grandpa tries to yank the spear away, but he can't even budge it. Out of nowhere, Ilias slams a massive punch into the guy's stomach, launching him back across the field. The hero shouts out, and the guy tries to stop himself by digging his spear into pieces. Ilias is totally fuming as he charges straight at the old man with a brutal attack, and even though the old guy tries to block with an annoyed look, the hit is so heavy it slams. Our hero panics and calls out to Grandpa Kara, but the old man just mutters, "My back, I'm dying, bye," before hitting the floor. And while the hero screams his name, the hero just shrugs it off, telling Ilias she should have kept her grandpa in mind. She snaps back at him, totally shocked by what he's even suggesting. Ilias. The hero calls her out, telling her to slow down for the old man since this is just a practice match. Ilias is totally speechless. She turns bright red but still tries to argue that. He asks if she's actually stressed about the hero saying Grandpa Kara is a better fit, but then explains it's just because the old guy is way easier to plan strategies with. She knows he'd way rather use his brain to plan things out than get into a messy fight, and since Grandpa Kara is so steady and knows his role, he's going to be a... Ilias gets all offended and asks what about her, but the hero says she's so strong that the whole fight becomes a total breeze the second she steps in. Elias is super embarrassed that he sees her this way, but he turns around and tells her he totally trusts her to protect him. Getting back to the point, he says he just needs someone to talk to and asks if she'd be cool with being his ultimate secret weapon. Elias tries to speak up, but the hero shuts her down with a head pat, telling everyone she's got his back 100% while he low-key enjoys being pampered. He tells her she's definitely not worthless and totally owns up to his mistake, apologizing for making her feel so bad. Ilias touched the empty space where his hand just was, and she told him that if that's the case, she owes Kara's grandfather an apology too. Ilias grabs Ulfa and they bolt, but the hero starts yelling at her for being so disrespectful, though she just shrugs and says the old man totally had it coming. Final polish. The hero's totally exhausted and asks when they can finally make up, but Malphite just laughs and says he'll think about it, while Ilias heads into Grandpa Kara. Ilias looks totally crushed and apologizes for acting out of spite, but her grandpa just laughs it off, saying he knows she talked to the boy and that he totally gets it. He unwraps the towel with the magic stone and keeps yapping, even though he totally lost. Then he looks the girl dead in the eye and asks if she's taking his spot, but Grandpa Kara tells her he loves how hard she's trying to get the guy to notice her. But she doesn't even know why she's doing it, and she asks Grandpa if he knows what's up, and he just cuts her off to say it's obviously love. Ilias is totally not feeling that answer, so she lets out a scary dark aura and pulls her sword, telling him that if she just snaps his back right now, the pain will finally stop, which makes Grandpa Kara immediately yell that he was only kidding. He's shaking as he begs her to think of his wife and kids, but she says her feelings aren't love at all, and Ilias gets scary as he demands to know what it... Gramps explains it's all about respect but not the knightly kind. It's about looking up to someone who can do the things you just can't. Grandpa says this kid is built different because he's actually willing to understand a villain's heart, choosing a path that the knights would never take. He says she's got the heart of a true hero, she's sticking to her own path, and she definitely doesn't want to live like a boy. She really respects him for following his own path, but Ilias just clenches his fist and tells the old man to stop using such confusing words. Grandpa Kara asks if a knight like Ilias could ever turn evil, but she shuts that idea down instantly, making the old man laugh and say she's exactly right. This kid totally gets knights and people in a way nobody else can, doing things others just can't pull off. Basically, he can do what she can't, so she's just looking. Grandpa tells her to stop being so biased if she wants the guy to actually like her, and when she asks if he really feels that way, he explains it's not just about one boy. Getting props from the prince would mean the world to her, because nothing feels better than being noticed by someone who's way more skilled than you. Elias is shocked at first, but then she gets this huge smirk like she finally figured it all out. She thanks him because everything is finally starting to click for her. Then she just beat. He flops back into bed, complaining about the hero he had to help out on the battlefield. That guy is honestly terrible at trying to act like someone else. He almost lost his life because of him. Now, the sun is finally starting to set. Ilias explains her grandpa's condition, and while the hero swirls his drink, he says he totally expected this from old man Kara. Ilias is super embarrassed, but the hero tells her to relax. Ulfe and Lakra are already fast asleep while the others keep chatting, and the hero is really putting all his faith in Ilias. She spots some sticky food on the table and asks what. The hero acts all smug, saying he just found this stick in the woods and fixed it up to be his new partner since the first one ended up as firewood. Ilias isn't feeling his speech at all, and says she'll crush him in one hit, even telling him to grab a weapon from the others, but the hero admits he can't even lift something that heavy. He says this stick is all he needs to remember what's important, and even if his team is super strong, he's only using this so he doesn't have to rely on them. Ilias totally gets what he's up to and says they've got no other choice, so she tells him to just ask if he needs anything. But as he stands up to leave, he tells her a single outfit is all he really needs. Carrying too much gear makes moving a total headache, so when Ilias asks if he's hitting the road, the hero just says it's not happening yet. Our hero is still thinking things over, and since he doesn't have to stay here anymore, he's considering just moving to a whole new country. Ilias nervously covers her hands and asks if he's not happy with her thighs, but the hero says he's actually loving the view, leaving her totally confused as she clasps her hands. Totally clueless, our hero says he needs to find a way back to his own world. He admits he actually loves his life here. He really wants to look after Ulf and make sure he thanks. He admits he has no clue what's coming next, worrying that his old life won't be enough to keep him going in this brutal new world. Right now, he's desperately looking for any way to escape this mess. This is the new reality, so you better get used to it. Our hero makes it clear that Ilias's vibe shifts, but she keeps smiling, arguing that Ulfa would be super lonely if he ever vanished. The hero totally misses how she's feeling and just casually says that he's definitely not leaving Ulfe with these sketchy guys. And as he grins with pride, Ilias realizes he's basically turned into her overprotective dad. Ilias asks him if he's got any family or friends back home, and the hero is so caught off guard that his mood just takes a total nosedive. He turned away from Ilias and headed upstairs, telling her it's personal, and maybe he'll spill the beans if he gets drunk one day, so he asked her to forgive him for now. He says goodnight and hits the sack, but Ilias won't let go, realizing his life is totally different from the hero stuff she's used to. She can't even imagine living like that, but he dives straight in without a single doubt. She gets totally heated because he's actually choosing to be a villain. She's 10 wide. He dives right between them without a second thought, and after the fight, Kara's grandpa tells her to never forget that the guy actually respected her. She's heading down one path while you're on a totally different one, and Grandpa says there's no way the kid can pull this off, especially since the hero respects Ilias. Ilias is starting to realize that she and the hero are actually a lot alike. They're totally drawn to each other because they fill in the gaps for what the other can't do alone. The next morning, Ilias is already geared up and barges into the hero's room yelling for him to wake up. But the guy is still dead to the world. So the room goes totally silent until the hero suddenly bolts upright, asking Ilias what the heck she's doing there. But she just beams and says she's his new bodyguard who has to stay by his side from the moment he wakes up, making him shout that he gets it and is already getting out of bed. He drags himself to the closet, yawning like crazy, but stops when he sees Ilias standing right there. He sarcastically asks if she's going to dress him, and her eyes totally light up as she says she'd actually love to. Our hero decides he's better off alone and kicks her right out the door, but later at breakfast, Ilya just stands there staring at him while a super sleepy Ulfa stumbles down the stairs. She joins them for breakfast, and when the hero invites her to eat, Ilya says she's already full, but she's so hyped that she starts spamming him with questions about if he's done yet or if he wants to head out and do something else. Ulfa grabs the moping hero by the sleeve and drags him outside, telling him it's time to move. The three of them head out for a walk, leaving Laka all alone. A little while later, the hero and Marito are walking through the castle halls while the king cracks up at the whole situation, and Marito teases him about where all these followers are coming. Marito says he's not even mad because they actually got to talk about way more important stuff in the end. This weather forecast thing from the other world is seriously mind-blowing since she tells him she's finally fitting in with the locals, found a job she can actually do, and is ready to pay rent, which totally catches Marito off guard. Our hero realizes Lecrae is terrible at multitasking, but she's a total beast when she locks onto one goal, which is why she's so scary in a fight where her only job is to crush the enemy. One time, Maya gave her a super hard sewing task and Lakra finished it with insane speed, proving she's way more reliable than most people, even if she still acts like a total kid. Marito realizes she might be onto them despite their hard work, but the hero just puts a hand on the king's shoulder and tells him to relax, leaving Marito totally stunned. The hero mocks Lacroix for being clueless and says she can't bring her back alone, which makes the king freeze up as he realizes his mistake and goes totally silent, while the hero just gives a... They head out into the garden. The sun is so bright it totally blinds our hero for a second. He lets out a wow because he's so impressed. They see this super chill. Marito flexes that he knows exactly where they're going as they head for the gazebo. The hero thinks the place looks just like a garden from Earth, and Marito just can. He asks if his country really doesn't have any, but the hero just stays chill and says that back in Japan, every garden is built around the vibe of wabi-sabi. It's got this super deep vibe that's honestly hard to put into words. Like, imagine finding beauty even when flowers aren't blooming. Then there are these tiny bonsai trees, and more osuru. The hero realizes Mana can actually feed these trees, so he gets a genius idea while thinking about how beautiful the forest at the Demon Lord Killer's Ridge was, and Marito totally agrees. Legend says the trees and leaves there glow like they've soaked up water magic, and Marito Dremley thinks that sounds so cool he wants to visit them at least once. The hero asks Ilias if she's getting bored, but she says she's totally fine, while Marito asks Lee Rachel if she ever stops to just look at the flowers too. Ilias gets super hyped and says she loves blades so much she could stare at them forever. But the hero and Marito just give her a weird look while Marito argues his taste in colors. Out of nowhere, Marito asks the hero if he's thinking about getting married. The hero says that's way too sudden. Then he tells Marito that he's the one who actually... This guy is so confused he thinks he's a queen, and when he's asked about the Marito brothers, he just says his dad has 3 wives and he's the only prince. Our hero realizes there's actually a huge upside here since it means no more messy power struggles, and Marty totally agrees, explaining that his sisters just marry whoever they want and travel the world as adventurers, which completely blows the hero's mind. Papa Danette says everyone is so worried about Marito that they're pretending he's totally fine and hunting for a bride for him, and even though the king agrees, Marito tells the hero that even though he meets all these girls at dinner, he hasn't liked a single one, and these dead-end dates are seriously wearing him out. Marito tries to get the hero to join his squad. He baits him by promising a bunch of gorgeous girls he's never seen before. Elias is right there listening to the whole conversation. She's the one in charge of the hero for the prince, but she thinks it's a total fail since the guy only likes older women, leaving Marito so shocked he has to ask her to repeat that. The hero gets super awkward and tells Elias to stop saying weird stuff, but she shuts him down by pointing out that since she's a soldier, Ulfe is like a dad, and Laka. The hero gives her a weird look and says he'll obviously be polite to the bosses, but then he admits he's totally not into older women, leaving Ilias completely blown away. He tries to tell Ilias that Ulfe was in a total mess, and he just had to step in to protect her, claiming he only sees her as someone who needs help while Likra is way cool. When she asks about herself, the hero straight up tells her she's all muscle and no brain, but he says she's not that bad so Ilias can finally relax while Marito just sits back and enjoys the show. The hero says she hates being treated like a girl, and while he was careful at first, Ilias asks why he's acting so different now. The hero calls her a brute who solves everything with her fists, but he admits he still sees her as a girl deep down, making Marito lose it laughing while Ilias just stands there totally. Marito wipes his tears and says he finally gets it, calling the whole thing super interesting. The hero laughs, but he knows exactly what Marito is really up to. He calls him out, saying, he stands up and admits the hero sees right through him, so even though he's ready to bail, Marito is sure the hero is actually needed here. The king flexes that he always gets what he wants, but the hero just stares him down and says he isn't going anywhere yet. Marito keeps those words in mind, but he knows he'll eventually leave if he doesn't find a reason to stay. So he begs his hero friend to go on just one date with him so he isn't all alone. The hero shuts that down immediately, saying things are actually totally fair between them, so Marito thinks it over and they agree on a new rule. If one of them invites a girl, the other has to bring someone too. Marito complains that he can't just swarm the hero with an army, so he challenges him to a best girl duel instead, while Ilias just mutters about how they're acting like total kids. They finally locked in the rules and promised not to change them. But as they left the castle, Ilias couldn't believe the hero actually dragged the prince into such a weird game. The hero tells her to cut it out because Marito is a total freak who'd probably force her to marry someone, leaving Ilias super confused. The hero promises to find Marito a great wife so she can stop worrying, and then Ilias jumps in to ask him what his type is. Marito is still just hanging out in the garden watching the sunset, but he remembers something and starts grinning right as his guardian calls for him. He sets the glass down in front of the king and asks if he just remembered something hilarious, while Marito adds that having more people join the chat always makes things way more hype. The king grabs a glass and thinks the hero is actually pretty hype, wishing he was just a prince so they could have spent their time plotting all kinds of crazy schemes together. Staring at his reflection, the king admits he's actually scared of how unpredictable he is, but he's still hyped to see what crazy move he makes next. The guardian says he totally gets his king, because even though the guy is way weaker than most people, he pulls off moves that put the elite knights to shame. And honestly, just think, Marito is totally shocked because his servant usually doesn't care about anyone, no matter how powerful they are. The guardian basically says there's no point because everyone in this country is a total weakling, but Marito explains they had to put him in charge of the hero's safety so the king could finally stop worrying. The guardian tells him to quit joking around, because if he's not right by the king's side, their whole deal is basically over. Marito just gives a satisfied smirk, and Pop Ev Paro finally rolls into the capital with his heavy-hitting squad, including Archbishop Uka Kanuk, the Holy Knight Captain Meshius Yox, and Pop Laris's caretaker. A carriage rolls through the city streets as the group finally reaches the massive Tissa Castle, heading inside and walking down a creepy, empty hallway straight to the throne room where guards are watching their every move. The priest in the middle introduces himself as a servant of Yukaro and says he's super sorry for the chaos, admitting they totally dropped the ball and let Baze get wrecked before he and his whole team bow their heads. Marito shrugs it off, saying they barely lost anyone anyway. The priest is shaking like a leaf, blaming the whole mess on Archbishop Uki. But Marito tells him he's totally... He pulls a book out from his clothes and tells them the Blue Demon Lord's diary is where all the trouble started. First, he hands the book back just like they planned, since he and Lord Ragudo were the ones who checked all the contents. Then Marito looks over and tells them the hero was the only one. He's keeping a super close eye on everyone showing up. Even Pop F. Pero is giving the hero a really sharp look. The priest turns to the hero and tells everyone that he's on a mission to see what kind of hero someone actually is, and the caretaker explains that thanks to the magic in his body, he can see right through a person's soul. The hero just nods and reaches out to shake hands, but as Pop F. Paro scans his stats, he realizes the guy has basically 0 mana and suddenly stops talking, just nodding, like he finally... Pop F. Paro realizes the hero is actually a total coward who's terrified of everything, so he tries to figure out every single thing around him just to stay safe, especially since our hero stays on guard because this priest is actually super sharp and saw right through him, so he just admits it's true. The priest bows deep to the hero, thanking him for finally sniffing out a traitor in the kingdom, but Papa Danans just brushes it off and says the real credit belongs to the people who didn't make it back alive. The priest says sorry for calling him a coward, but the hero just shrugs it off since it's the truth. Then he turns to Archbishop Yuke and bows to thank him for all his help with. Akka admits he totally dropped the ball, so he's just cleaning up his mess. Behind him, his caretaker can't help but giggle. She mentions that Akka was actually nervous. She flashes a sweet smile, but our hero instantly gets a bad vibe from her. He decides he needs to keep a super close eye on her. He walks right up and asks if they've met. Feeling pretty down, our hero decides he's got to go check things out for himself. While flipping through the book, F. Paro reminds him that some secrets can only be shared face. The priest agrees but asks if the hero has that same power. And when the hero says he's got something similar, he invites everyone to join the fun while Marito grins, knowing things are about to get crazy. The hero says this is a test to see if they've actually got guts. So first they have to pop the Uparo, and then he tells him to repeat after him. The guy repeats the hero's words exactly and asks if he's doing it right. The hero says he's doing great and tells him he needs to say the same thing to Archbishop Yu. He stumbles through the hero's words, but Papa Danit makes him repeat that he's Archbishop Uka. And even though he says it more calmly this time, he's still totally confused about what the point of all this is. Our hero points out that Uki's whole vibe changes when he's being honest because he's way more confident, and the Archbishop just nods and says he gets it. The hero turns to the Knight Captain and says it's Yox's turn, but he calmly uses the wrong name for the first phrase and then does the exact same thing for the second one. He tells him to repeat the third phrase about being the captain of the Order of Holy Knights, and the guy says it with zero hesitation. The hero is actually impressed, saying he lived up to the hype, and now it's finally the lyricist's turn to show what they've got. The hero says the first two lines and she repeats them back totally chill, but then his voice gets super dark for the third sentence, and Laris just stares him down and repeats that one too without even... The hero goes quiet for a second before sadly admitting the fourth truth that she's a Lahite, and suddenly everyone in the room is on guard and ready to fight while Lyris just stays silent. Everyone squares up as things get intense. Dark energy starts swirling all around Larissa, and she flashes that same creepy smile we all know. The hero asks her to repeat what happened, but then he realizes she can't because Pop F. Pero and Archbishop Uka can tell exactly when someone is lying or telling the truth. He's done hiding, so he flashes a massive cocky grin at the shocked crowd and asks the hero exactly when they finally caught on. He says he wasn't totally sure, but he just couldn't wrap his head around the idea that a guy like him would actually choose to end it all and give up everything so easily. The hero explains that Lahete knows some of the book's secrets, but since he's missing the full picture, he refuses to die until he uncovers every last detail. The hero explains that ever since that day, he's been super cautious around anyone new. But Lahite, who's still disguised as a girl, can't believe he got, he's watching the hero like a hawk, wondering if Lahite is actually going to back off. Because even though it's smarter to stay quiet, he's hoping the guy slips. The hero finally speaks up and says he's actually a pro at reading people. So while King Marito and Pope Uparo were busy chatting, he was watching everyone in the room to see exactly how close they all really were. The hero fires back that she was the only one who felt totally creeped out. Lahad keeps pushing for more answers. She explains that she caught him smirking while he was messing with Archbishop. Pop F. Pero kept a strange distance, acting not too friendly, but not totally cold either. The hero kept a super close eye on every single move he made. His subordinate was supposed to act. He says anyone else would totally fall for a girl this cute, but for a dark soul like him, it's just never gonna happen. Lahite finally gets what the hero is saying, realizing he totally messed up, because he was too distracted just watching him in person. The hero finishes his speech and asks if they've met before, but Lahite swears this is the very first time they've ever seen each other. Only someone trying way too hard to lie would talk like that, so he decided to test him. He knew these tricks better than anyone since he used them on Maya and Lakra before, and it felt like total deja vu. Lahite is totally hyped by the hero's reaction and says it's exactly what you'd expect from an earthling, but Archbishop Oki loses his mind and demands to know what. Lahite explains that when he slashed his neck, he actually used magic to rip his soul out and leave his physical shell behind. This ritual is a total pain to set up and hard to repeat, but Lipide actually warns them because he's already got a backup body ready and doesn't want to ruin the one he... Our hero realizes this magic is a total game changer since he doesn't have to fear dying anymore. But man, you've got to have serious guts to just throw your own body away like that. Father Ev Paro knows soul magic is totally banned, but he went and did it anyway. Lahate just gives this creepy little smirk. He says he'd love to keep chatting, but knows. He looks right at the hero and says he's stoked to finally meet him, while they just give the hitman a massive side-eye. Lahite gives a fancy bow and says he's heading out, but promises they'll meet again. Right as blood starts pouring from the girl's mouth and she collapses onto the carpet while Uka rushes over screaming her name. He pulls her mouth open and finds sharp magic crystals hidden inside, shouting that they need to save her right now as the crowd starts to freak out.